All right, what is going on? Drive time Thursday afternoon, about 9 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It's nice today, man. It is sunny. Little clouds in the sky. Not much, though. Pretty sunny and clear here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. Porter Larson producing the show behind the glass today. Good to be back in studio. Feels like it's been a number of weeks. Last time I was in studio was last Thursday, so a week ago, and we are back after taking a little time off. And then on remote yesterday with the Dish Professionals. Good to be back here in the Broadway Media Studios in beautiful downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. Happy Thursday to everybody out there. Week 12 of pro football gets going tonight. It's going to be the Steelers and the Browns. Utah Hockey Club is in action in the greatest part of the country. Everybody knows it. Nobody says it out loud. The Northeast. It's going to be Utah and Boston tonight at 5 o'clock Mountain Time. That game's on ESPN+. And then an hour after that, the Utah Jazz tip-off, taking on the San Antonio Spurs. No Victor Wembanyama, at least as of about an hour ago in that game tonight. So we'll get to some pro basketball on the show today. We'll do a little hockey on the show today as well. And obviously one eye on the college football weekend ahead with both Utah and BYU. National implications as well. Good slate of games, not great. Good slate of games, not great. But ultimately, a lot at stake as we are high speed ahead to try to decide what that expanded 12-team CFP is going to look like and whether or not it will include BYU. When it comes to the Utah side of things, it is a chance to honor the seniors or everybody who is leaving the program. Not sure what that number is going to look like. Coach Witt alluded to 20 to 25 players. You know, there'll be some players leaving to try their hands at the NFL. Some players, will hit the transfer portal. We're high speed ahead to the transfer portal window opening. So we'll get to, of course, all the storylines surrounding the Utes and surrounding the Cougars leading up to this big weekend ahead in college football. Unfortunately, on the pro basketball side of things, injuries have dominated the news cycle. Luka Doncic hurt his wrist. He'll be reevaluated. There is chaos in Philadelphia. Joel Embiid, apparently Tyrese Maxey with some uncomfortable conversations. Embiid upset that the story leaked. They're 2-12 on the season. Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, Joel Embiid have played 6 minutes together, okay? So we'll do some pro basketball. It really is that time of year, at least on this show. If you've been listening to the show for a while, first of all, hello, thank you. How are you? We like to cover the NBA. We like to cover the Utah Jazz. But we typically wait around Thanksgiving-ish, and we're kind of to that benchmark. Typically we talk about, let's see what we have after 20 games or so, and, try to analyze exactly what the league is, what's real, what's not. With the Utah Jazz, it's going to be tough to make it very interesting this year, but we'll do our best to try to follow this young team as they try to grow and find their footing. So we're going to do some NBA and some Jazz basketball on the show today on this Thursday afternoon. Our guest list looks like this. Right out of the gates, it's our weekly conversation with Richard Smith, who spent 40 years with the Utah Jazz in that front office trying to build championship teams. We'll bring Smitty in today. It is the Big Show, Big Hour, but we are apart as Craig Bowlerjack is on the road. We'll bring in Bowler today on the other side at 3 o'clock, then Gordon Monson at 3:30. And it is the triumphant return of a celebrity on the show today, Dave McMenamin, who has now graduated to what I refer to as celebrity reporter. The guys like the Stephen A's and the Frank Isolas, the guys you see on television, talking heads on ESPN. Well, Dave is kind of that now, so he's been big-timing us, but he's going to make his return to the show today, coming up in the 4 o'clock hour. Our friends from Handy and Handy for some sports court, and a lot to do on a busy Thursday as we are almost to the weekend. But on this show, we like to reward you with a weekend starting on Thursday. So go get loose tonight. Responsibly. Enjoy yourself. Richard Smith, Craig Bowlerjack, Gordon Monson, Dave McMenamin, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson. What was your reaction when LeBron James announced that he's leaving social media?
I was devastated. Beside myself.
Can I just say something real quick? You don't need to announce it.
Right.
Okay? All right, take care. Kirk Kragthorpe quit the Tribune, deleted his Twitter the next day.
That's how you do it.
And then just bounced.
He created a new Twitter several months later, but he only tweets about golfers with Utah connections. I love it.
It's a beautiful thing. That's what you do. And look, it's not just a shot at LeBron. I swear every time I fire up social, there's this idiot who's like, hey, guys, too hostile around here. Oh, yeah, breaking news, people are mean. Oh, really? Did you just join the platform yesterday? And because of all the toxicity, I've decided you can find me on Blue Sky. Like, thanks, bro. Appreciate it. Just go. Go. We're going to be fine.
I'm with you.
That includes LeBron, by the way.
Yeah, and listen, yes, you have valid points in discussing the negatives of social media, of the interwebs, Spence. Yes, there is a real issue there, but again, you don't have to announce it. If for the betterment of yourself, you're going to leave somewhere, just walk out the door, and we're good.
There was this weird week, and we'll get to the show, but there was this weird week, and it was it was like during COVID, summer George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, everybody's on edge. And then the conversation during COVID is like, what are you doing for your mental health? Are you taking care of yourself? And there was this week where like 3 producers from the Jazz broadcast team were like, I've got to take some time off from this gig. I got to take some time for me. I'm like, you show up to work 2 times a week, 4 hours at a time, bro. Like, what exactly is happening over there where you have to take a break? And they would announce it like with a paragraph. I'm not taking care of me, man. I got to take a break from the gig. I'm like, all right, well, thanks. Take care. I guess it's generational, Porter, is what it comes down to.
I do think there is something to that where, folks of, I would say maybe like 30-ish or younger, my age or younger.
32.
Think they have to like announce stuff because we've grown up on social media. We've grown up, hey, here's my college that I'm going to. Here's where I'm going on my mission. Here's what I'm having for dinner tonight. Here is what I was doing this afternoon. So, of course, if you're leaving that platform, you have to let everyone know, Spence.
Last thing, I deleted Facebook, and you're not wrong, but last thing, I deleted Facebook after I saw a status update from my aunt that said, enjoying a mint Milano cookie. I don't know why that put me in a bad mood for a week, and I deleted the app. I'm like, and I love this woman. I just don't give a rip that she's eating a mint Milano cookie.
So Cambridge Analytica and all that stuff didn't get you, but the Milano cookie.
It was the mint Milano cookie that sent me over the edge. I mean, everything else is going to work itself out, but you have to take a stand in life, kids. That's our lesson on a Thursday. Anyway, weird start to the show. Richard Smith will be our first guest right out of the gates, but before we get to Smitty, courtesy of our good friends at Standard Restaurant Supply. Standard Restaurant Supply is your tailgate headquarters. One more Utah tailgate coming up on Saturday. Get everything you need there to make your tailgate epic. Check them out at standardrestaurant.com or stop by their location at 3500 South West Temple. Time now for your opening tip. Thinking about this morning, and I'm excited to have the guest list that we have because I think they'll be good with this. Darren Williams went on the All the Smoke podcast. That's Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes. And they asked him about Jerry Sloan. And, Darren gave a very eloquent, about, 6, 7, 8 minute response where you could tell there's a lot of remorse there. And, he was talking about his relationship with Jerry. And this is not this isn't a segment where we're going to talk about Darren Williams and Jerry Sloan. Just stick with me for a second. And then I was thinking about the comments made by Coach Witt on Monday during his media availability. And Sean and I were talking about this during Crosstalk. Kyle on Monday did not sound like a coach that's going out like this. That's how I digested that sound. That's how I kind of processed it when he talked about the introspection they've done as a staff and what has to change. And by the way, what has to change now? Like, this is not something that you can wait for a couple of months and say, okay, everybody take a few weeks. Scally, you go to Tahiti. Sharif, you're in Hawaii. And then we'll reconvene in about – no. Like, you have to hit the ground running. This is as bad of a spot this football program has been in since Kyle took the job. And probably, we could even go back a little bit further than that because – even though straight wins and losses, you can look at some of the early seasons in the Pac-12 that have similar records. Juxtaposed to expectations, this is, by any measurable metric, and I'm sure Kyle would say this himself, the worst football season that Utah football has experienced as Kyle Whittingham as their head coach, with Kyle Whittingham as their head coach. I truly believe that to be true. And it's not just the wins and losses. And yes, we can talk about injuries because we have, and we can hit that over the head. It's what we thought they were, I think what they thought they were, and what everybody who covers college football thought Utah football would be this year under Kyle Whittingham, because what we're accustomed to seeing them be. I mean, last year, to get 8 wins with that skeleton crew of a roster was a masterful coaching job, and this year they might not go bowling. They're a serious underdog at home coming up against Iowa State, 5:30 on Saturday. Reminder, our pregame coverage begins at 1:30. The line as of now is 7, settled in at 7. It was at 7.5, so Utah is a full touchdown underdog against Iowa State on Saturday. You add the 3 points you usually get from Vegas as the home team. Essentially a double-digit dog. That's what Vegas is telling us as far as Utah football goes coming up on Saturday against Iowa State. Hopefully everyone's excited. Hopefully everybody will be there. I would encourage you to head up and support these young men, and certainly with senior night, saying goodbye to the seniors, the upperclassmen who will leave for a myriad of different reasons, whether it's pro football, graduation, transfer portal, our final time to say goodbye to them. And this really has been a really exciting, 4 or 5 year stretch of Utah football, even though this year's been such a bummer and last year was rough too. But, listening to Kyle on Monday, he certainly did not sound like a coach that was ready to go find something more constructive to do with his time. And I don't know when Kyle's going to walk away. As I continue to repeat daily, like, that's not my thing to break. That will be Kyle's news to give us in his own way and in his own time. But it certainly didn't sound like a coach who was ready to walk away to me. And, of course, the contingency plan in place is Morgan Scalley being escalated and promoted to the head coaching seat when Kyle has decided that his time is done here as the head coach. So when he talked about the hunt for the offensive coordinator and how Morgan would have his fingerprints on it, well, of course, but I don't think that means that Morgan is taking the job next year, as a lot of people have surmised, okay? So if we expand this topic a little bit, okay, with the Jerry Sloan stuff, the Kyle Whittingham stuff, really what we do in Utah, and mostly we're applauded for it because the coaching industry is so volatile. And these guys are hired to be fired. I mean, we talk about their golden parachute, and certainly it's ridiculous that Jimbo Fisher got, 90 mil or whatever, maybe 76. I don't remember what the number was. He got an obscene amount of money to stop doing his job. And stuff like that's ridiculous, but the golden parachutes are built into these deals by agents because these coaches get fired at the drop of a hat. And they have families. You got to go figure something out to do. And if you've ever tried to move being broke, it's not fun, is it? So you got to move a family across the country. At least you have that security in place. So when you lose your job, because you will lose your job, sports coaches and executives are hired to be fired. The long tenured ones are unicorns. The Greg Popoviches, the Bill Belichicks, but even the Bill Belichicks have an ending, okay? So ultimately, we're applauded here culturally for finding good coaches, holding on to them for a long time. And, with the Jazz stuff, what Frank Layden did is rarefied air in pro basketball, essentially giving up his seat as the head coach to Jerry Sloan because Frank was sick of the grind. He was sick of traveling, and he thought Jerry was ready. And obviously Frank was right. And Jerry held on to that job basically 2 decades until an unceremonious ending with a young player who certainly, in his own words, was a prima donna and a punk, and kind of chased Jerry out the door. And a lot of people will never forgive Darren for that, right? Because that's how much we loved Coach Sloan. And then there's Lavelle Edwards, who's going to be a little bit of an outlier in this conversation. We'll get there. And now we have Kyle Whittingham. And we could keep going with other coaches who have, Rick Majerus had the job forever. Dave Rose had the job forever. But really the only coaches, regardless of tenure and regardless of winning a number of games, the only coaches that have lifted trophies, we can count them on one hand. It's Lavelle, 1984 national championship. And I'm talking about the big trophies. I'm not talking about winning the Pac-12 South, okay? Jason Kreis won MLS Cup, right? And are we stopping now? I mean, there just aren't, like, the Jazz won the West. BYU won the WAC 1 billion times. Utah won a couple of Pac-12 championships, didn't win Rose Bowls. So I'm defining this as championships. And I'm wondering whether or not the way we do this here is the right way to do it if your goal is to win a championship. I don't know the answer. But as Morgan Scalley is getting ready to take over for Coach Witt, if it's not next year, it's in the next 2 or 3. And is Morgan going to have a 20-year coaching career at the University of Utah? Now, of course, Kyle won. And that's the complicated part about this job. What are you going to do? Fire Jerry Sloan after he won another 50 games and got you to the second round of the postseason? But there's a really fine line. And I'm going to be interested to see how Ryan Smith handles his coaching situations, because the tech bros have this thing, the new young CEOs have this thing where it's like, even if things are going well, you need to replace your personnel in the name of taking the next step. Good to great. I mean, that's kind of how these guys run their companies. I've got a little brother who's a CEO. And it's kind of a paradigm shift in my understanding of how things are done. Like, if things are going well, you just keep it going. You keep building. And I have to wonder how long Ryan's going to be patient with this Jazz team that is they're 7 Cooper flags away, okay? Like, they're so far away. And how long do you keep it going? Because I know there are people in this market that are really keenly interested on the offensive coordinator hired for the University of Utah, because it will indicate whether or not they continue the status quo or they open their minds to maybe try something new. Now, let's be clear. The status quo is not bad with this football program at all. Not even kind of, right? Winning Pac-12 championships, advancing to good bowl games. Like, it's not like it's bad. But if the point is to consistently compete for championships, is it good enough? And I do feel like there are people ready to move on. Now, I'm not going to do the thing where it's like, oh, maybe it's time to move on from Kyle, because I'm not doing that. And I want to be very clear, that's not the point of this segment. But we do have this ethos here in the state with most of our sports programs where a lot of coaches get jobs and keep the jobs for a long time, even if they don't win. Rick Majerus didn't win, right? And I'm talking about a national championship. Rick Majerus took teams to the Final Four. He won at a very high level. He should not have lost his job. But we keep coaches for a long time, and we also don't win championships here. How closely are those two things tied? I'm honestly wondering out loud. I don't know. But we have this kind of changing landscape here in the marketplace with Utah football, and I think it's going to be really fascinating to see what comes next as Morgan takes over as the head coach soon, and whether or not Morgan just continues Kyle's paradigm and his approach, and whether or not that's something that can elevate this football program to winning Big 12 championships or whatever those championships are defined as. Because the fact of the matter is, to be fair, for a myriad of different reasons, they are not even close this year. Smitty will be good with this. Richard Smith, 40 years in the Jazz front office, knows both Frank Layden and Jerry Sloan. Obviously knew Jerry, rest in peace, very well. Craig Bowler, Jack Gordon Monson, Dave McMiniman, little Sports Court 2 off and running on a Thursday afternoon. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. The Utah Jazz are in action tonight, taking on the San Antonio Spurs. With the injury information I have in front of me, Victor Wembanyama will not play. And if you're going to watch that game start to finish, tip of the cap to you. There are a lot of interesting pro basketball storylines right now, though. Live in studio for an entire hour, our guy Richard Smith. Smitty, happy Thursday. How are you, sir?
Spence, we're doing great, and it's a great afternoon to be here. The sun's out, and it's a beautiful mid-November afternoon to hang out with you. This is great, and for you to make an appearance in the studio is very nice.
I miss a couple shows, and this is all I get.
This is
Smitty.
Hey, that's what you set yourself up for. By the way, am I right, Porter? You miss one day. That's the Lou Gehrig rule, right?
Listen, if you miss more than one, which Smitty has a point here.
I miss a couple shows. This is all I get. Smitty, I got to sharpen the sword.
Hey,
I got to take a little time off.
And we know people have to take days off. Porter, people get hurt. They're sick. They have to go to the hospital. Something happened, whatever. And then there's the other set of people who head out of town, with their clubs in the trunk, and they're having a tough time with their days off, So anyway.
Yeah. So 40 years, you never played any golf or took any time off with the Jazz.
You know what?
Yeah.
I'd have to think about that seriously, because I was one of those guys, Spence, who, as you know, in all the years that I was fortunate enough to be with the Jazz, I was the guy who always thought, well, as soon as I miss a day is the day that somebody will look around and go, well, what was he doing here anyway?
You just want to be part of the furniture, then.
So you make sure you're protecting your space, because when they have that group meeting on a Thursday afternoon at 2:30, and they're all sitting around the conference table, and they go, now, Richard Smith, is he coming to the meeting? They go, I don't know, the George Costanza rule. Is he still working here or something?
Then just show up on Monday.
Yeah, whatever
after
it is.
quitting on Friday.
So anyway, I was the guy who always showed up, because I was afraid if I didn't, then there'd be a different sign on the door, and my key wouldn't work the next day, and all that kind of stuff. So, but I know you have a much bigger stranglehold on this radio station than I
I can guarantee you, I very much do not. But I do believe in taking time off, so I will have none of this slander at all. I believe in taking as much time off as you can, and then taking more.
Hey, there you go.
I think it's good. I think it's good for you. But that's just me.
The guys who do that are the smart guys.
Right.
Those are the guys smarter than me.
I'll take the compliment. Okay, Smitty. We'll get to the Jazz, I guess, but I wanted to get your thoughts on. So I'll unpack it real quick. I talked about it for our opening tip. Darren Williams went on a podcast. He went on the All the Smoke podcast, one of your regular listens with Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson.
Yep.
They smoke a lot of weed, and they talk about basketball, hence all the smoke. I'm not saying Darren was smoking, but Darren talked about his relationship with Jerry and gave a very eloquent 7-minute answer where you could tell there's still remorse there and regret there. Called himself a prima donna and a punk, used some words that you can say on podcasts but not on live radio. Mm-hmm. And it just made me think of a larger topic to dig into. And obviously, as somebody who knew Jerry and knows Frank still, and coaches that coach in our community, there's this thing that I think mostly Utah is applauded for. And by Utah, I mean kind of the sporting culture, where coaches get jobs, and they keep those jobs for a long time. I gave a bunch of examples. One I didn't think is like Stu Morrill, Utah State. Dave Rose, BYU basketball coach, Majerus. And look, some coaches come and go. I'm not saying all of them keep their jobs. You have to win and perform and do well. Of course, Coach Sloan, Lavelle Edwards. Now Coach Witt appears to be in the November or December of his coaching career. And when he leaves, it'll basically be 2 decades. So we keep coaches for a long time, but we don't win championships. And I had a conversation with somebody about the Utah coaching situation where they're about to hire an offensive coordinator. And Kyle on Monday said Morgan's fingerprints will be all over this. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And I think a lot of people are curious to see what this hire is, to indicate whether or not Morgan is simply going to continue what Kyle's built. Like the succession plan in place. Kyle built it. Morgan will continue it. Will Morgan put his own stamp on it? Will he just kind of toe the line and do what Coach Witt did because that's who he learned under? And whether or not that's the right approach, there's a really fine line, because I'm not saying like Jerry should have lost his job or Kyle should lose. I'm not saying any of that, right? But as a guy that's been part of this, building rosters and trying to compete for championships consistently, what's the line like when you have a guy you like an awful lot, but he never can quite get you where you want to be, which is lifting a trophy at the end of the year? If that makes sense.
Well, first of all, the coach of any organization, of any team, is obviously your leader in terms of the strategy and the approach you take to the competition that you're bringing, every single game that you do, whatever the sport is. But there are so many other moving parts of that process, Spence, that go into play, and it's not just the head coach. The head coach is there, like the Broadway star, the who has the top billing on a Broadway musical or whatever. They're the big star, but there are so many other moving parts that make that production fly and make it interesting and sells tickets and all that kind of thing. But if you're competitive and you have some measure of winning and you have some level of success and you're able to do it on a consistent basis, this thing about, quote, not winning a championship and that being a reason why your employment should be questioned, every time something doesn't go right. Kyle Whittingham, their team has stumbled this year. 5 months ago they were everybody's darling. They had Cam Rising coming back, and we're going into the Big 12, and they're going to run the Big 12, and they're going to the expanded playoff format. So that's almost a given that Utah is going to be in there, and all that kind of stuff. And we know all the things that have happened between last summer and now to the program. But that doesn't diminish anything about what Kyle Whittingham has done. It doesn't diminish, say anything about the work that they're doing right now. They've had a series of things that have happened to them that they've had to deal with. They haven't had success this year as they had hoped. They have 2 games left. They win the 2 games. They go 6-6. Maybe they get into one of the lesser bowls, whatever, and everybody goes, well, that doesn't mean anything or whatever. Okay, I get it. But when you're talking about someone who's been so competitive and has had such success year after year after year, those guys, not only do they know what they're doing, but they need to have the respect of the people around them to know that that's what they're doing makes sense. What they're doing is great for the organization, the group they're with. They need to be given the respect that they've earned through that process. For example, Mike Budenholzer is in Milwaukee. He wins a championship. I was just reading this the other day. No reason this number is in my head. When he was at Milwaukee, he won 71% of his games and won an NBA championship. Oh, by the way, how did they win the championship? They won the championship, if you remember, because Kevin Durant's toe was on the line in the second round. If his toe isn't on the line, Milwaukee doesn't get out of the second round, right? Never mind, go on and they things fall their way and they win a championship. Okay, they did it. But Mike Budenholzer gets let go the next year after they had won the championship when they didn't do it again or they weren't as good as whoever is making those decisions thought they should be. Who was the guy who was just someone else was just released recently? Who was
in pro basketball?
No. Oh, the guy in New York, Robert Saleh. Your team, the Jets, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're telling me that guy doesn't know what he's doing, and that guy doesn't have a feel for what their organization should be about. Yeah. Have they gotten where they want to? No. Did the Aaron? You want to debate about the Aaron Rodgers thing all day? Okay. But if you're telling me that the character of that guy doesn't deserve some more time to try and get the thing together, especially when they brought in Aaron Rodgers and upset the whole thing, that they were building culture-wise by bringing in a prima donna from another organization who's going to have all the answers. That just, to me, that doesn't make any sense. And so, the long-winded answer to your question is, I think coaches who have shown that they know what they're doing and have some success, there's something about consistency, Spence. There's something about continuity from year to year to year that makes sense in an organization. And if you fall short and you don't win a championship, well, okay, everybody wants to hold the cup at the end of the day. If you don't do that, but you know that what you're doing makes sense, the whole process of it, A to Z, then you're smart if you stick with that, if you tweak some things along the line, and if you think you can get something more, you keep working at it. But we're in an age now, I believe, in U.S. history in general in our society, where everybody wants something yesterday, and if they don't get it, then they're just going on to the next thing, and it doesn't matter. And it's really a tough thing for me as an individual to swallow when I see things like Mike Budenholzer or Sala or whoever it is. Somebody just got released on the college ranks like last week or something. I can't remember who was a winning coach, and they're stumbling this year, and all of a sudden they fire him in the middle of the season or something. It makes no sense to me at all whatsoever.
So a few things here, because I don't disagree necessarily with the majority of what you said, and I certainly was not implying that anything that has happened this year or last year should diminish the way people look at Coach Witt. And I don't think it has, locally or nationally. Kyle has worked his way up into being one of the most respected coaches in college football, nor was I implying that as a result, the Budenholzer example is bananas. Okay, that's ridiculous, and they're reaping what they've sown. By the way,
yes,
wasting Giannis's prime. Okay,
that's right.
Don't love the Saul example as a Jet fan. I don't think he's the one that should have fallen on the sword, but your point stands. But let's break it down then, Smitty, because here is the ultimate question. I have always fundamentally rejected the premise that you cannot win championships in Utah. I fundamentally reject that. However, the data is on that side because we just don't do it here for whatever reason. But I fundamentally reject the premise that it's because of where we live. I don't believe that, because I watched R.C. Buford and Greg Popovich build a modern dynasty in San Antonio, which is a smaller market than ours. And if you've been there, no offense, I'll take Salt Lake, right? Yeah. So I guess it comes down to this question. How do you go from Pac-12 championships, Western Conference championships, conference championships to national championships, NBA titles, right? Because that's the only piece we're missing.
Yeah.
We've got everything else. Lavelle won in 84. Jason Christ won in 2009. The list of, big trophies we've carried in our state is small. And so I'm wondering if there's anything there at all. And I agree with you, by the way, the continuity. I remember when they gave Kalani the job. I said, well, I hope he gets 4 or 5 years, at least, to build a recruiting cycle for 4 years. Down there, it's got to be 6 because of the mission. Transfer portal has blown all that up. And I was told this week at a tournament I was playing in with a bunch of BYU guys, there was legitimate concern. I think it was 2017, 2018. I think they lost 6 of 7.
Mm-hmm.
And they were wondering, is this the guy?
Yeah, right.
They stuck with him, and it's paying dividends. So the continuity point is well taken, and also I agree with. So I'm going to ask you, how do you go from the level right below the level that you need to get? How do you get to that level, Smitty?
Well, again, Spence, there are a lot of factors involved in that. Look what Kalani and BYU is doing this year with a quarterback who was just a guy who, by most measures, was just passing through, and he was just the next guy that we're trying to cycle through, and they harken on this magical season for them so far at 9-1, who's not killing anybody, the quarterback, the main guy, right? Not killing anybody statistically and beating teams over the head with a stick, but the whole team as a unit, everything's come together. What happened in '84? Who did they win the national championship with? Probably the quarterback who was the least heralded of a string of maybe 20 years of quarterbacks at BYU, whether it's Giff Nielsen or Jim McMahon or Steve Young or Ty Detmer or Steve Sarkisian, all these guys who were big-time guys, and the one guy who broke through and goes undefeated, wins the national championship, is Robbie Bosco.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so it's not just that guy, and it's not just the head coach. It's all the other parts that contribute to what you're trying to do in a team sport. And if you have one cylinder that's off, then it doesn't quite work that way. And of course, we're seeing the ultimate example of that this year up on the hill. You know, with everything, all the chips this year, Spence, were pushed in the middle of the table, to use the Jim Fossil line, right? With bringing back Cam Rising. Cam Rising's coming back. He's going to play with us. Here we go. I'm betting the whole thing on this one hand, because we're going to ride this guy, right? We're going to ride this guy to the national championship semifinal game, or however far he's going to take us. And then the whole thing falls apart when he goes on the sideline and gets hit, and his hand gets hit, and whatever. And the whole thing starts crumbling, right? That happens too frequently in a lot of different sports, in team sports, where one cog is knocked out, and then all of a sudden it's just like that game where you pull the little, what is that called? Jingo?
Django?
Yeah, is that what it is? Where you pull
Zanga.
Where you pull the little wooden
Jenga.
thing.
We combine
Jenga,
two words, Jenga.
Yeah, pull the little
Django,
piece of wood
Zanga,
out of the
whatever.
bottom,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden the whole thing collapses.
Yep.
But so you're talking about we haven't won a championship. Well, we haven't won a championship. Okay, the Jazz had been ultimately competitive, and by most NBA standards, and this isn't me talking. This is other people coming to me and saying these things over the years, that the Jazz were held in high esteem, by the league in general in New York, and by most teams around the league, as running a model franchise, because they always figured out a way to be competitive, to have a team that you could really rely on to give you not only a tough game tonight, but to be competitive all during a season, and to be able to be in the playoffs and compete. And sometimes the ball falls your way, sometimes it doesn't. And I was just watching the other night. I was watching just because it had come to my mind. I'd seen Carlos Boozer at the recent Jazz game, and we were reminiscing about some stuff. And I went home and was watching Game 7 of the Houston Jazz series back in 2007 when the Jazz went down to Houston and won that tough Game 7 in the first round. And we're about to get knocked out of the first round, but they win that game down there. Booz had a big game. Memo had a big game. Darren Williams was very good in that game on the road against Yao Ming, Tracy McGrady, Shane Battier, and those guys in Houston. Won that game, played Golden State next round. All of a sudden, they're in the Western Conference Finals against a tough Spurs team that they lost to because the Spurs were better. And the Spurs ended up winning the championship. But those are the things that happen, plus or minus to you along the way. And trying to judge things at the moment, if we had done that, Kalani Sitake would have been out 2 or 3 years ago.
Kyle Whittingham may have been out.
Yeah.
Third or fourth year in the Pac-12.
Yes,
yeah.
and that's, but if you believe that those guys know what they're doing, that there's an honest work ethic, that you have an organization in place and a plan that you believe can get you sustained success, you're really not in the right business if you don't think that that's the way to go, and you just keep knocking. Look, the Spurs built a dynasty. How'd they build a dynasty? Oh, the lottery ball came up. Oh, it came up in what year? Oh, it came up in the year that Tim Duncan's in the draft. Oh, really?
And David Robinson
wow.
before that. They
That's
won
right.
a title together. Yeah.
That's right. And who else was on that team? Tony Parker, a guy they hit on, picking at 26 in the first round of the draft. Okay, 25 other teams that year could have had Tony Parker. Oh, they didn't. A lot of questions about Tony Parker at that time. They get to the Spurs. The Spurs, you give them all the credit for doing what they did, but they didn't have any magical answer. They just thought Tony Parker, a nice developmental player, let's take him and see what happens. Same thing, a decade earlier, that happened with the Jazz when they took John Stockton at 16. Okay, John Stockton, if he's good enough, yeah, maybe he could be a solid backup to Ricky Green, who's an all-star. Yeah, maybe that'll work. Okay, and then John comes and bing, bang, boom, and, but you can't plan those things, but you try and make the best decisions at the moment with the information you have. And then what else happens with the Spurs? The third link in that group of their dynasty was number 56 pick in the second round of the draft, Manu Ginobili, who was playing over in Italy from Argentina, and they take him like every team does, I promise you, Spence, in the second half of the second round, where teams are just looking for a flyer and looking for somebody, we probably not going to make the team, but, we like that guy some.
Andre Kirilenko. Maybe
he can play, Paul Millsap was taken in the middle of the second round. Mo Williams was taken in the middle of the second round. Jeff Hornacek was taken in the middle of the second round. Okay? You have to have some luck to have that happen. You have to have some luck to win a championship in whatever the sport is. If you believe what you're doing and you believe in pounding that stone and just keep at it, and good things are going to happen. And what happens, Spence, but too often, and especially in pro sports, is that the owners or the top level executive guy gets antsy. People get after him. They're tired of answering questions about why they're not doing this, why they're not doing that, and they pull the plug too early, and they start recycling, and then they can't get traction, and that's why they keep spinning their wheels.
Yeah, a lot of really good points in there. I looked this up because I was for 3 straight years. Now, the Lakers won the championship in the bubble, but they still won. Frank Vogel, out of a job 2 years later.
Yep.
Year before that, Nick Nurse won a championship in Toronto. He's now coaching Philly. And then as you the Budenholzer thing is so wild, man. It really is. But some good points there. We'll move on. I thought Smitty would be good at this. We'll do some Jazz coming up. Also want to talk some big picture NBA. But before we catch a break, we're going to bring Bowler on coming up in a little bit. Got to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. So it's very easy. You don't have to worry about terms like the spread and over-under. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players. For a shot to win up to 100 times your cash, you can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. They're giving away a free square that starts today, and it goes until Thanksgiving. It's Tyreek Hill, more or less 0.5 receiving yards, right? So you get 1 square as a win already. If you match that with 1 other win, you're going to get the money that you put down. So download that app, use the promo code, get $50 instantly. More with Smitty and Craig Bowlerjack coming up next right here on ESPN 700. I have to say, I'm sitting here very stunned. This happened 10 seconds before we went on air. We'll let Porter tell the story. Porter, all of a sudden, all I know is all of a sudden I look across from me and Smitty lifts his sweatshirt up to show you the T-shirt he was wearing. What did that T-shirt say on it?
Our guy's got a Green Day shirt, an old school Green Day shirt. I think accurate to this album.
Yes.
Smitty,
Yes.
you could have said, hey, I saw a concert in Phoenix last month and given me a million guesses. I don't think I would have landed on Billy Joe Armstrong and Green Day.
See that? See, Spence, I've been trying to tell Porter all this time that I'm a Renaissance guy.
Yeah, I know that.
I'm like all over the map. Like you can't pigeonhole me, man. I got stuff going on left, right, up, down. You know, it's this isn't a static existence we have going on over here.
So what? You know what? We have Bowler on, but I want you to think about this before we break. I want to know what it looks like with Smitty at a Green Day concert. Like, are you in the mosh pit? Are you dancing? Are you on the outside?
Hey, I'm just glad. I'm sure somebody somewhere has some video footage.
Okay.
It hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
But okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's go to San Antonio. Live on the Riverwalk is where we find the voice of the Utah Jazz, Craig Bowler. Jack Bowler, how are you, sir?
Hey, Spence, great. Smitty, the worldwide traveler of his day. I'm not surprised he's a Green Day guy. I'm really not.
Bowler, are you down at one of those great Mexican restaurants on the Riverwalk that we used to go to all the time?
Yeah, been there, done that, but just waiting for that beautiful 4:30 Central Time bus to take me over to the new Frost Bank Arena.
Yes.
AT&T is no longer. So
yes. Now, Bowler, are you
we were
the
here 12 days ago?
The 4:30 is that the first bus or is that the fifth bus?
That's the second bus, and there's three, but it feels like five, to be honest. Yeah, we are all well traveled, and we are all kind of, what do you call it? We're stacked in different levels, and we go when told to go.
Oh boy, I know.
All right, Bowler, I want to bring you into, we'll get to the Jazz, of course, and we'll talk about the game tonight, but I want to bring you into the conversation that Smitty and I were just having. And I started the show out with this as well. Darren Williams went on a podcast and talked about his relationship with Coach Sloan and how it dissolved and how he wished it was different. And we're dealing with this thing here with Utah football where, Coach Whittingham is at least in the December of his career. Nobody knows when Kyle's going to step aside, but they're going to hire a new OC. And Kyle told us this week that Morgan will be heavily involved. And I could keep going with Rick Majerus and Lavelle Edwards and Stu Morrill. I'm not going to be as long-winded as I was with Smitty. Here's the crux of the issue and kind of the topic, and I want to get your take. We do this thing in Utah where we keep coaches forever, and most people think that's great, and I'm not saying it's not. But the other thing we don't do is we don't win championships. And so I'm wondering what the last step looks like from Western Conference Finals to NBA champ, from Rose Bowl champ to competing for national champ. And I'm not saying it's all in the coaching. It's just kind of an interesting thing to consider as we've had a lot of really successful coaches that have won a lot of games but never quite get over the top. So give me your thoughts on that.
You know what? The first thing that hits, and I think Smitty will, I don't know what you guys discussed or what Smitty thinks, but from my perspective, and when Richard was traveling with the Jazz, part of Sloan's staff, Sloan's, let's just put it, old school. Same with Kyle Whittingham. Look, they expect one thing, hard work. And the NIL would have drove most coaches out of the business. Nick Saban, for one, has already made his departure. And, I think that's going to probably play a role in his future. Mark Harlan's blow up after last week's loss probably did nothing good. Lynn Roberts departs for the WNBA. There's massive changes going on. And Spence, it happens. It happened with the Jazz. Jerry did it his way, one way. And you know what? He got out because of illness, but I think also it was the right time. It was a different time. It was a players' league that began to turn, and Darren was the early piece of that new puzzle that everyone's trying to dance around. Will Hardy, grew up in that, and he's probably, quote, better suited to deal with all these personalities that come out now, not at 23 and 4, Smitty, like a lot of the players that he dealt with, Big T. Bailey being one. He was more mature and was ready to play in the NBA as the 7th pick. But now you have to be able to handle a 19-year-old, sometimes an 18-year-old, who's on the verge of 19. But that's what's happened to the Jazz. You have to be able to communicate, and I don't know if Kyle's lost that communication with his team. It's going to be interesting to see what Iowa State does at Rice-Eccles, and they're a touchdown favorite. And has everyone sold out, bought out? Are they still listening? Are they coachable? And I think that's where it comes down to. Jerry realized, Smitty, and that it was a different time. The league was making a massive turn to another direction. Jerry, all he wanted to do was have a couple of coaches, let's go play, and he could evaluate his own talent the way that he played, right, in the old days. And that was rough and rugged. And if you're hurt, you put tape on it and you go play. And that's what Carl and John did. But a new time came. And I'm anxious to see if there's a new time coming at the University of Utah as well, because recruiting is just so big. And now BYU has caught the eye around the country and in the Big 12. And does that also harm Utah and the way they pursue players? And also, is there questions of how long? And it was a problem, right, with Coach Lavelle Edwards at BYU. How long can you guarantee me you're going to be here if I'm going to come play? And that's going to be a big topic, I think, as the recruiting season continues on.
Well, Bowley, you make a good point about the age thing, especially at the pro ranks in the NBA. With the Jazz and the so-called Jerry Sloan era, most of those guys, John Stockton, did not become a starter, the full-time starter under Frank Layden until he was almost 25 years old. He was a four-year college guy. Thurl was a 4-year college guy. Mark Eaton, a 4-year college guy. All these guys came in when they were 22, 23, didn't play for a couple of years, whatever, and then when they got their feet under them and got going, they were 24, 25, 26 years old. The guys that Will Hardy's dealing with now, all these guys that he's being given to work with outside of Markkanen and say Colin Sexton, for example, all these guys were just a year in college and they were 19 and 20 years old, and there's a big difference between 20 and 24. And not only in your maturity, your ability to process information, your body changing physically, and then also the maturation of your game and being able to understand what's going on at the NBA level. And so, these guys are going to struggle when they're young because that's just the role that they're given. They're coming in much younger than they used to. And with very little experience. The guys didn't have any, Taylor Hendricks played 1 year at a mid-major at UCF, and then this year they were going to give him major minutes, and then he had the unfortunate accident, and he's going to be out for the year. And then at the college ranks, you've got this whole new NIL thing, and you're exactly right, whether it's Saban or whether it was Jay Wright at Villanova or whether it was even our guy up the road here, Randy Ray, at Weber State, who was there for 16 years and won a bunch of stuff up there. And as soon as this started, the NIL and transfer portal stuff started happening a couple of years ago, Randy, cut the cord and said, "No, I'm getting out now because this isn't. If I get another Damian Lillard, if I'm fortunate enough to do that, I'm only going to have him its freshman year." And we can't hold on to him at Weber State because UCLA or Kansas or Texas or Arizona or Gonzaga, whoever it's going to be, will come in and take that guy and he'll be gone because of the NIL money that they're going to give him. And so that's changed that whole landscape, on that level. And so all this stuff that's evolving and changing, it's a different approach. It's a different way you have to handle your business. And it really makes things more pliable and more evolving on a quicker, rotating basis. That makes it hard to establish any kind of consistency and stability.
Yeah, continuity, Spence. I don't know if Lavelle would have coached as long as he did dealing with NIL, honestly. But again, Lavelle's Lavelle, and he did win the championship in '84 in a very odd way, which wouldn't happen again today. But things are changing drastically, and it depends on the coach. What do you want to handle? What stressors do you want to try to put on the table and say, I can, no way, I'm out? I mean, it just depends on what Kyle wants to do and if he wants to continue to try to deal with a lot of those issues about money, an 18-year-old wanting to be paid. And again, when everyone was in college that I knew, if you had a scholarship of any kind, it was an honor because you were able to get an education. But that's not even in the discussion points now. It's basically cash up front because most players are only going to be in for a short time. And I think that's sad because education important. And a lot of these guys, Spence, as you know, football 3.5 years, NBA, Smitty, what, 4 maybe,
Yeah.
Unless you're incredibly talented. So by the time you're 25, 6, you're done, and it's the next man up. You know what happens to Taylor Hendricks at the age of 20 with a very serious ankle and leg injury? Does he play again? I hope, but will he be the same? And those are the things that bother me. Is that the dream a lot of us have, but sometimes that dream doesn't happen or it doesn't last very long because someone else is coming up behind you that's even better.
All right, Bowler, let's move over now and just talk some Jazz basketball because we've got to set you loose in about 5 minutes. They're 26 in offensive rating. They're 28th in defensive rating. They're 28th in the net, 21st in true shooting, 24th in effective field goal percentage. The offense has been a little better over the past little bit, but they, look, we all know the deal. We all know what time it is. They've lost 3 straight. They've lost 4 of their last 5. They're 3-11. So are you seeing any signs of progress even though the wins aren't coming?
Well, they flipped the offense a little bit. They kind of went 3 guards at particular times. They continued to kind of use some zone and put some ball pressure. But the 3-guard lineups, not starting, but in the rotation has been intriguing. Tonight, JC most likely won't go, still doubtful. But you may see more Collier. You may see more Juzang, and you may see Bryce Sensabaugh, who's been a DMP the last 5 or 6. It's a constant, it's a constant game of chess of moving around different lineups at different times for Will Hardy to see what meshes and what doesn't. And also, when you're down, who wants to play? Who keeps their head up? And who wants to actually, be a man in this league, which you have to be, as Smitty knows. There's a little bits of progress, but not huge, jumping over, huge hurdles at the moment. And I think, fans are just sitting there going, okay, well, what do you got? And let's see the development. Some nights you see Keontae making strides, and his assists are up this year, which is good. I like Filipowski. He had an off night against the Lakers. Only took 3 shots. Marketing, if they can loosen him up and find some more shots, he's a dynamic player at 25 against the Lakers. Collier's intriguing. Drew Eubanks is a 7-year pro, but still, I think gives you that toughness that you have to be competitive. And then still waiting to see what Juzang, Sensabaugh are all about. And again, Cody Williams is another huge, question mark. He was scoreless in L.A. against the Lakers. Did not even take a shot in 8 minutes. And Filipowski has obviously jumped ahead of him and is starting now and should make his 8th start tonight. But, it's a process, Spence, that it depends on how patient Ryan and Danny and Justin want to be and how patient the fans want to be. 3-11, I think, is bottom 5 in the NBA, maybe bottom 4. They do want a high draft pick, and it looks like they're on their way. It's game 15. So, the games are clicking off pretty fast, and we come back and have a quick homestand before we jump back out on the road to start the month of December. So I think what we're seeing is development, and it's going back to this whole – to bring it back to a full circle. I don't think Sloan ever thought the NBA would be a developmental league, not the NBA, okay? Now, the G League, yes, but the NBA was for players ready to play, not to be developed on the floor at the time. Yeah, you can grow and you can still learn, but I think more or less during Jerry's tenure, Popovich's tenure, and we wish Pop all the best, making progress, we understand. But they had game-ready players, and that's just not the case for the Jazz right now. There's a lot of old veterans still playing and producing, but the young guys are definitely around the league behind in that development. I think overall, honestly, I really do.
Well, Bo, what do you think about the this John Collins at the 5 spot? He seems to be it seems to be more effective when he's when he's playing there.
He's thriving. You know, Lowry can play 3 or 4. The front line's big. Filipowski, up until the Laker game, had been really productive, improving on a 3-point shot. John's relentless. I mean, the guy's going for 8 boards a game, Smitty. He has 4 double-doubles, and he's shooting the 3 a lot better and finishing up on top of the rim. I think at this point in time, he's been the most surprising and probably the MVP of the Jazz. And this is a player the Jazz probably in the beginning didn't have a lot of plans for. But as Will told us, it's 1 injury or 2 away that I have to have John Collins and Jordan Clarkson in the lineups, whether it's a starter or a major rotation player. And you know what? His sixth sense came to fruition, right, with the injury to Taylor Hendricks, and that changed the whole scenario of that front line and gave Filipowski, I think, advanced minutes and an opportunity to start. And I tell you what, playing at Duke and playing at some of these higher-level Division I schools, you know, have advantages. Well coached, he seems to understand the game better than most. And also, I'm impressed with the way he's been able to handle different schemes that's thrown at him. He may be a real steal at 32 in a second-round pick. Just again, it's young. It's only 15 games in tonight, but still, he's been impressive in a very short period of time.
All right, Craig, we know you got to get to it, so we'll set you loose. Have a great call tonight and travel safe. We'll chat soon.
All right, man. Smitty, good to talk to you. Spence, talk to you next week.
All right, Bowler.
All right, the Craig Bowler Jack. All right, we got a few minutes left with Smitty. We got about 5 minutes left with Smitty or so, if not a little longer. Maybe we'll steal him for a couple more minutes. I'm going through the league numbers, and most teams so far have played between, looks like 17 is the peak, and then a couple down at 13, 14. So we're not quite to like a big sample size. The one eyesore, they're bad everywhere. They're not really good anywhere. There are a couple of metrics where they're like top 15 or 16, like field goal assist percentage, they're 16 or whatever. They're dead last in the league at opponents' points off of their turnovers, which continues to be a problem. There was this weird narrative that I heard some Jazz broadcasters using, like turnovers don't really matter. And they would always point towards Golden State. Well, look, Golden State ranks near the bottom of the league in turnovers. I'm like, yeah, they also have Steph and Durant and Clay, and you don't. So turnovers matter to you in a way it doesn't to Golden State. How do you coach that? Because it was a problem last year. It's a problem this year.
Well, they're just not good. I mean, that's and Bowler made a perfect point, Spence, that I don't think is talked about enough, and that is that the Jazz have said, you know, we're developing young guys, and Bowler is exactly right. Back in the day, quote unquote, the Jazz aren't a developmental team. The Jazz are, as Phil Johnson would use the phrase, this is the varsity, and the varsity is supposed to compete and play and produce. And the Jazz are using the NBA team as a developmental team. Those guys should be at the G League team. Mm-hmm. That's where you develop. That's what the G League is for. The Jazz are supposed to be fielding a competitive team. That's what the fans pay very good money to go see. That's what the sponsors put money in for, et cetera, et cetera. They're just not a good team right now. You have John Collins, who's playing fairly well right now, especially at the 5, as we mentioned a minute ago. Has had some nice games at the 5 spot, very efficient in that regard. But John Collins is not an answer going forward for what the Jazz have stated that they want to try and do, which is develop young guys. He's making too much money for what he does. Okay, that's on the people who signed him and have him on the contract. But he's not going to be a guy that they're going to be keeping long term and hope that they can hinge something on him. So I don't know if playing John Collins is because you're desperate and that's all you have. Okay, that's what the hand you dealt with at the moment. But if they could get something to move on from him and get out from under that salary, because at the end of the day, Spence, it doesn't matter. What is he doing? He's doing something nice. He's playing okay. He's with some young guys who are developing, making mistakes. And what do we got? We're 14 games into the season, 15 tonight, and they're 3-11. So as Gordy Chaser would say all the time, it doesn't matter. Whatever he's doing, the bottom line is not affecting the bottom line of winning, so you have to do other things. So the fact that the Jazz are a developmental team, Bowler hit the nail on the head. You know, that team is supposed to be at the minor league level. That's where you're supposed to be developing. Your job is supposed to have players who are supposed to play and produce, and they just don't have that at the moment by their own design.
Smitty, hold the phone. The Utah Jazz are currently 7th in the NBA in offensive rebound percentage.
There we go.
Championships.
Yeah. I don't even know what that means.
I
don't even know what that means.
Percentage of shots that are missed that you go get. That's all it is.
Yeah,
offensive rebound percentage.
I know what it means. I don't know what it means. And I mean, now you're getting into analytics
it's just the one stat where they're not in the 20s. I was looking for one that they weren't in the 20s.
I got you.
Trying to give them some love here.
Yeah, I got you. You know why and why is that? Why is that?
Probably Walker Kessler.
Because the shots are being missed.
Also that.
The shots are being missed. That's how you get to be in the top part of that category is if you're missing enough shots.
Right. And the other stat where they're 30th is the percentage of their possessions that end in turnovers.
Yes.
So they don't take care of the ball at all.
No.
Is that just youth? Is it just, hey, we suck and we're going to suck all year?
You know what? I think part of it, Spence, my own opinion, is that part of it is they have sloppy ball handlers.
Mm-hmm.
I think they do not play with a level of urgency where they're being held accountable for taking care of the ball. I think they don't have great decision makers who are handling the ball. I think they're trying to create stuff that isn't there when they have those turnovers. I think it's a combination of things that boil down to the fact that they're just not very good at this current time. And I'm not sure, Spence, I like some of the parts they have, some.
Not many,
okay,
though, no.
But it just seems to me like a disparate group that they don't really fit together even though they're young, okay, you want to hang your hat on young, inexperienced, with developing, whatever the excuses are. But at some point, you have to show improvement. You have to get better, okay? Their defense was horrible last year through 14 games this year, which is not even a quarter of the season. It's still bad. It hasn't really improved appreciably, right?
28,
so
yeah.
This youth movement thing is going to keep rearing its ugly head. The fans, it's going to be interesting to me to see how the fans, how long they let this go on and let what I think is some level of smoke and mirrors in terms of trying to sell the fan base on developing and all that kind of stuff, before you actually start, seeing some appreciable improvement or some measure of making things happen in a positive way. Because right now it looks like to me what the players are doing, they put all the players in a big pot like a stew, and they just keep stirring the pot, and they're hoping at some point that it becomes a decent meal. And so far, it doesn't look like they're getting anywhere, or somebody, quote, forgot to turn the heat on the stove, and so the thing isn't being prepared properly. If that's a lousy enough analogy.
No, they haven't even paid the gas bill. They can't even light the stove, Smitty. It's watching is hard. And look, I'm not going to be able to break down John Collins on a weekly basis. Like, if that's the guy,
yep,
good for John for playing well,
yep,
but probably tells you all you need to know. All right, you have an obligation. We're going to release you to. You're going to go. Is it technically still a matinee?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
You got a matinee to take in with your lovely bride.
As long as the sun is up, right? Is that what the rule is? I don't know.
I don't know. You're going to go see Wicked.
I don't know. Yes. Yeah,
okay.
We're going to be at the front of the line, Spence.
All right. Well, then I better let you go
Okay.
because she's outside. Great to see you. Okay, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, my man.
All right, Gordon Monson joins us coming up next. Before we catch a break, the Big O Tires Big Hour is brought to you by Big O Tires because, of course, that's what it's called. Following a savings sale going on right now, $80 to $120 off select tire sets. Big O Tires is your true one-stop shop for automotive repair. Stop in for tires, wheels, alignments, rotations, oil changes, brakes, batteries, shocks, struts, fluids, and more. Big O Tires offers free flat repairs, air alignments, and brake checks. No credit-needed financing options to fit any budget and any situation. Walk-ins are welcome, or you can schedule an appointment online or visit over the phone. Visit BigOTires.com to find a location near you. All right, Gordon Monson coming up next right here on ESPN 700. The Big 12 championship game scenarios are pretty chaotic, and BYU and Colorado can actually clinch this weekend. BYU wins over Arizona State, and Utah beats Iowa State. BYU is in. Does Utah want to help out the brother down south? We'll have to see. Colorado can get a berth if they beat Kansas, and then BYU and Utah also win. So there are some clinching scenarios, but there are technically 9 teams still alive in the Big 12, and Utah's not one of them, which is really weird. But let's get out to the phones. Big show, big hour continues with our guy Gordon Monson from the Salt Lake Tribune. Gordo, happy Thursday, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks, Spence. How are you?
I'm well. Pretty crazy where we find ourselves, and it's not a new topic, but let's look back before we look forward. And let's start with BYU finally getting got. You know, they had really played on a razor's edge all year long. Prior to last week against Kansas, they were a 4-0 team in one-score games. Kansas was actually 0-4. That script flipped in Provo. What'd you make of Kansas rolling into town and getting out with a win?
BYU made too many mistakes in that game, Spence. It was pretty obvious to anybody who watched. When you get down in that red zone, you got to do something with it. And what you can't do is throw an interception. And that hurt BYU big time. And that was a curious play call. It's something you probably talked about this week. But I have a lot of respect for A-Rod, but he called some plays that were rather curious to me. And when you have the ball inside the 5-yard line and you have time to punch it in, I don't know why you're throwing fade passes into the corner of the end zone, especially when they do get picked off. That pass hardly ever works. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, that was a curious play call. A-Rod after the game, you know, he kind of owned it and he wore it, which I appreciate. But ultimately, Gordon, I'm not taking anything away from BYU and their 9-1 start, and no, you know, nor should anybody else because they've answered most of the questions. But this loss does open up space for a conversation about just how good they are, juxtaposed to just how fortunate they've been. You know, the College Football Committee has been screaming at us that they're not very high on BYU. Now, I take that more as an indictment on the Big 12. Like when the first CFP rankings were released and I saw BYU at 9, my first reaction was they don't like the conference. They don't think the conference is very good. They are telling everybody that this is a one-bid league no matter what. It's odd that they have BYU behind SMU, a team that BYU won. But ultimately, the loss on Saturday, I think, opened up a lot of space for a conversation. Again, just how good BYU is at a 9-1, you know, with a 9-1 team that still has a path to the Big 12 championship.
You know, and I think that can be erased or at least diminished this week, depending on how the Cougars play. We saw a lot of tight games. We saw the Cougars coming through against teams like Oklahoma State and getting a last-minute touchdown to win the game. And you've got to appreciate a team's poise and ability to get those kinds of wins. But there was this suspicion of what you speak, and then to see them go out on their home field and play the way they did and lose that game to Kansas, I think that cemented in a lot of people's mind exactly what you said. But, you know, BYU outgained those guys by about 100 yards. You would have thought that BYU would have been able to win that game. They looked like a better team to me, but they couldn't get it done at the end the way they have so frequently this season. And that, you know, how many times do you hear complaints about either a play or a receiver who runs a pattern on fourth down where you have to pick up the first down and he's 2 yards short when he catches the ball? I mean, these are the kinds of mistakes that BYU made in that game that made it possible. But then you think if it's a really quality team, if BYU is that good, should they be having a razor-thin victory on their home field at this point when they're undefeated?
No, and that ultimately was the point of my question, and really it's a tricky dance, Gordo. It's a delicate line because wins and losses are all that matters. But every game tells a story, and at some point, if you're relying on Lady Luck, it's going to go the other way. Whether it's blackjack or football, you hit a heater, and suddenly you're winning games, or you're winning money, and suddenly the cooler sits down at the table. You look her in the eyes, you're like, I'm about to lose $2,000. You can't rely on luck every single game. And I'm not saying they have. I'm saying there have been a lot of very fortuitous bounces that BYU has capitalized on this year, and a lot of them they've caused, and they deserve credit for. But I'm still sitting here honestly wondering, while very impressed and happy for Kalani and his staff, I just wonder how good they actually are as a result of how many things that have seemed to have gone their way. And on Saturday, many of those things weren't there. And, they lost to a team that's been playing a lot better. But how do you think they'll respond? Because ultimately, the loss does not kill them in any way, shape, or form. They're still atop the conference. The one thing it did do is eliminate the possibility of entering the Big 12 championship game undefeated, then losing, and maybe still being in the Big 12 still being in the CFP. But the committee is telling us this is a one-bid league. So now they hit the road, and Kenny Dillingham has done a really, really good job with his Arizona State Sun Devil team. BYU is a 3-point dog. And ultimately, I wonder how you think they're going to respond with everything still in front of them to play for after such a disappointing loss where they couldn't get it done.
I'll say it this way, Spence. Can BYU win that game? Yeah, I think they're capable of winning it, even on the road. They're undefeated on the road this year. I think they're good enough to do it. But they have to bring their A game. They have to play well, and they have to avoid mistakes to get that victory. Are they capable? Yeah. Can they do it? Yes. Will they? That's the big question. Because if they go down there, this is what's interesting about BYU. They've shown good poise through the year, and they've won some of these tight games. And what does it take to do that? You have to be confident. You have to be calm. You have to be able to execute, like coaches always say. They've shown that they can do that. But I don't know. Against Kansas, they just look jittery. And so what happens when you're undefeated and then you drop one, and suddenly the teammates start looking at each other going, oh, can we get this done? They start questioning themselves, and there might be some jumpiness, some jitters going up against Arizona State on its home field. So really it comes down to that sort of human element. How confident, how collected will they be going down there? And will Jake be able to lead the team and get the job done without making mistakes? Will the offensive line create space for that run game? And if that all happens, then BYU gives themselves a great shot to win it. I just don't know whether it will.
Tell me, Gordo, with your knowledge of certain footprints in our country, what is the fellowship like down in the greater Tempe area? How much BYU blue will we see at that stadium?
Oh, I think you'll see plenty of it. Obviously there's a lot of BYU fans down there. And I have a friend who happened to go to ASU, and he thinks that anytime there's a professional team, an NFL team in a town, it diminishes the enthusiasm for the college team. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't know if ASU will bring all kinds of fans. I think there is excitement building because of the success that this team has seemed to generate of late, and they have a running back who's pretty fun to watch. That kid, I think he's probably worth some good money to go watch play. Scatterboo, I'd like to see him. If I were living in that area, I think that would be a draw for me. And, Levitt at quarterback, those guys have been putting it together of late. And when teams win, usually that's a pretty good draw.
And Arizona State still has a lot to play for. They still have a chance to qualify for the Big 12 championship, which would be stunning based off of preseason expectations. That's going to be a motivated group. Saturday, 1:30 ESPN. That's going to be a great game. Excited for that one. Now, Utah goes to Boulder, and they get it hung on them. 49 points hung by the Buffs. I'm not sure that anybody was very surprised on the loss. I think the amount of points and the amount of yardage you give up, every time Utah's defense gets gashed, it's just odd. But Shadour's doing that to everybody all year. And Colorado can clinch a spot in the Big 12 championship game with some help from both Utah and BYU. If Colorado gets the win this weekend and Utah and BYU win, Colorado's in, as is Brigham Young. So Utah actually this weekend has a chance to help out both Colorado and BYU, which is pretty weird to think about. But takeaways now from a sixth straight loss for the Utes before we look at what's next.
That game was a mess. And I know the Utes drew within, 11 points in the second half. But, man, just this is a disappointing year, as you mentioned, for the Utes, and they seem to be disjointed in bad form right now. But we'll see. I mean, I think Kyle always gets his teams up to play, or usually does, and so I would expect them to be able to bounce back off of that thing. I thought it was funny that Kyle Whittingham said, that's the best team we've faced all year after playing BYU, who has a similar record. I think Kyle likes doing that kind of thing. But based on comparative scores, you'd have to say that Colorado certainly showed a lot better against the Utes than BYU did. The key, Spence, I think, looking ahead to Iowa State is Utah has to do something. Traditionally, it has done really well, but this year has struggled to do, and that's run the football. They've got to run the football against Iowa State. Iowa State is the number one pass defense in the Big 12. The run defense, I think, the second to worst. And so what does that mean? Can Utah run the ball against a defense that is weak against the run? Well, they have to. They have to, because the pass defense is really good.
So shout out to the young buck, Jason Batacchio, over the Salt Lake Tribune for the question he asked Coach Witt on Monday about the search for the new offensive coordinator. First, I should ask you, are you threatened by Batacchio, this young kid? You think he's coming for you?
No. And the fact that I'm not threatened by it, that's no diss on him or anyone else over there. It's just that once you get long in the tooth, at my point, it's what's there to be afraid of? I mean, it's just, no, I'm not, to answer your question.
What's there to be afraid of? I have so many things running through my head. Meeting your maker, I guess. But no, here's
believe me, that thought went through my mind too.
Okay. No, but I wanted to ask you this because I was told that after Jason and Kevin and Bell have been on the beat forever, they actually finally met you last week. Is that right?
I had met Kevin and Jason before. I had not met Bell. That I had not done, which was my pleasure. So, I mean, okay. It was nice. And I will see them again tonight at a Tribune function. So I will continue the development of those relationships.
Okay. No, I'm proud of you. I just wondered because I can remember doing the show with you, I think in 2017, and you said you were stopping at the Tribune building to pick up some mail. And in the mail, you found a personal invite to the governor's mansion from like 2012. And how often are you at the Trib building to check your mail, Gordon, is the ultimate question.
Well, I guess I'll say it this way. A few years ago, I was driving up to the Tribune, where the Tribune is located, and one of the staff photographers saw me drive up. And he came over to the car. I stopped at a stoplight, and I rolled the window down, and he pointed up at the Tribune building and said, "It's the building right there." So yeah, that's how often I show up.
All right, fair enough. All right, moving over to the question. So on Monday, as a result of Jason's question, Kyle went through the answer about finding the next offensive coordinator. And really, to me, Gordon, and I want your takeaways, he sounded like a guy that's not going anywhere. He sounded like a guy that's been introspective. He talked about the upcoming transfer portal. He talked about how many players they're losing. He talked about, he and Morgan side by side, finding the new offensive coordinator. He sounded to me, Gordon, like a guy that's looking at the season and he's saying, not like this. Now, they've got a lot of work to do. They got a lot of work to do starting now. They cannot wait. And so I would imagine they're busy bees up there. But what's your take on what I perceive to be a pretty introspective Coach Witt on Monday?
Well, the transfer portal obviously makes it easier to rebuild, although it is complicated because everybody's grabbing those good players. But I don't know, man. The feeling I get with Utah football this year is, and maybe it's because we all thought they were going to be so good and they didn't turn out to be that. And you can't pin it all on Cam Rising getting hurt. It seems as though, and this is weird to say, Spence, and I might be wrong on it, but it seems as though the culture in that program right now has been disrupted. And I don't know what it is, with NIL money, and you need to do it this way and that way. And that's something that's new. And we know how much Kyle Whittingham hates that whole process. But you have to master it. In this new era, you've got to master that in order to get the kinds of players you need to turn a program around quickly. You mentioned Colorado and what Deion Sanders has done there, and how inside of 2 years, look at the difference he's made. Does Utah have the financial backing that it needs to get the players they need, and does it have the ability to attract the players that will want to come to Utah to make a difference? And meanwhile, you've already named your defensive coordinator as your head coach in waiting. And so there are all these things coming, sort of hanging in the air right now around Utah football. And it's so weird to say that because they have been so culturally sound over the past, 5 years, certainly, and before that. And so does Kyle Whittingham have the energy to turn this thing back around again? Sometimes these football programs, it's like freaking turning an aircraft carrier around. You can do it now in this day and age, but it takes certain elements to get it done. And can the Utes do that? And does Kyle Whittingham have the desire to do it and the energy to do it? These are questions only he knows.
What's your gut tell you? Based off of how you know him, does he strike you as it's not ending like this guy, or does he strike you like I've accomplished enough, I don't give a rip what this year's look like?
I hear what you're saying on the first part, but in my conversations with him and my conversations with people around him, I almost get the feeling that he doesn't have that much to prove anymore. And so does this really make a dent in his legacy at the University of Utah? I don't think it does. No, he doesn't want to go out with this kind of season. And what happens if they lose on Saturday and then they losing 8 straight games? If that were to happen, I mean, that would tear at him. I know that would tear at him. But I think the number one thing for Kyle Whittingham isn't the football program. I think it's his family. It's the things that he wants to do with that family. He's got a lot of reasons to live beyond football. And that weighs heavy on him. His dad passed away at 64 years old. He just turned 65, today? Happy birthday, Kyle Whittingham. Today's his birthday, 65 years old. I think that stuff is weighing heavier on his mind right now as far as the big picture than what the record is this year.
Let me ask you this before we move on to something else before I set you loose. When we hear the announcement of the new Utah offensive coordinator, do you think it's going to be an offensive coordinator that kind of fits the mold of OCs that we've seen here for a while, that wants to do what Kyle and the other piece of this is, what does Morgan want, right? Is Morgan going to simply pick up the baton from Kyle and keep running in the same direction? Or is he going to go streaking in the other direction in the stadium? Is he going to do his own thing? Is he going to get weird? Is he going to do the Morgan thing? Is he going to do his own thing? Or is he going to just follow what Kyle's done? And I think this hire will indicate a direction one way or the other. Is it going to be a meat and potatoes offensive coordinator that wants to run the football and wants to play Kyle Whittingham football? Or do you think they're going to open up their minds a little bit to bring in somebody to maybe modernize this offensive attack? Because, Gordon, the cruel truth about this year is if they had an average offense, they'd still be alive to win the conference championship.
You're exactly right. And I look back at what Nick Saban said, who was putting together those great defenses at Alabama for so long. And then all of a sudden, inside of like 1 year, he changed his mind. And he decided with the rules that are involved in college football now, you've got to have a powerful offense to be at the top of your game. You've got to do that. And so the whole meat and potatoes thing, I think and you and I have witnessed this for many, many years, and maybe it's changed a little bit when Cam Rising showed up and Andy Ludwig a little bit, but it got to the point where the Utes were trying to do things differently, although for many, many years it had been about protecting that defense because that was Kyle's baby. And but I think Kyle has slowly come to the realization that something has to be better. You have to have more explosion in that attack. and I mean in the positive sense, not the negative, which means you've got to get yourself a quarterback. You've got to, in this game now, you've got to have a quarterback. If you don't have that who can get the job done, then you're in big trouble. And that's not even a slam on Isaac Wilson, because obviously if you bring a freshman in and say, okay, go out there and make this offense go, give it the spark it needs, that is a tall order. Do I think Isaac Wilson has it in him to be pretty good? Yes, I do. And again, I can't read the future. I don't know whether that will actually happen. I think he's got ability, but you've got to have that in order to do what you were talking about. And I guarantee you that Morgan Scalley, after defending against teams for so many years now, he knows that better than anyone. So I think the answer to that question is, yeah, there will be modifications in a more prolific attack.
All right, Gordo, before I say you lose, shockwaves across Major League Soccer today, as you know. And when FC Dallas brought in Nico Estevez, everybody thought he was going to kill it. Looks like Estevez is gone. And from what I'm reading, to fill that spot, they are going to bring in a gentleman named Eric Quill. So what are they losing with Estevez? What do they get with Quill?
Well, Estevez never got comfortable in Dallas. I mean, you could just... Yeah, everybody knew that. And, sometimes guys, they just don't get their footing, and so they struggle, and then it becomes a mental game, not just a physical game. But I think this is a good move. I think FC Dallas will put them in good stead, because I think there's a cohesion that comes with this kind of player that will bond the team together, and they'll be able to be in good form, much better form than what they were before with Estevez.
So just real quick, this was a coaching change, not a.
Well, yeah, but that's what I mean. It's gotta start at the top with the leadership, and then it sort of trickles down from there.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, good. I'm because I didn't know how to cover that story, so I thought I'd get your thoughts. Gordo, appreciate.
Well, I'm glad I could help out.
Oh man, appreciate it, buddy. We'll chat soon. Okay.
Okay, see you later.
I still love the bit when I just corner him and he's wrong and I have to correct him. Maybe I'm the only one, but hey, it's my show. I need a laugh on a Thursday. Ironically enough, Gordon Monson today brought to you by Clearwater Distilling. It's the only distillery in Utah County open on Sundays. Great spirits, tasting room, and the nicest crew around. They've got their Wednesday whiskey batch number 2. It's a limited release out right now. Try their Scandalous, their Renee, or their vodka in state liquor stores. There are ESPN Tailgate VIP Spirits provider. Come by the tailgate, check it out. They do a great job. Ultra premium spirits you can buy in state liquor stores online, or check out their distillery where you can grab some booze, some cigars, and have a good time down there. Go to clearwaterdistilling.com or check them out at 564 West 700 South in Pleasant Grove. All right, the triumphant return of a celebrity reporter comes your way next. You're going to have to stay tuned to find out who it is right here on ESPN 700. Porter, I'm going to try not to get emotional here, but this is a proud moment. It's also been a long time since we've had our next guest.
Too long.
For sure. But one of the things I love about this business is when I get to mentor young media members and interview them and teach them the ropes and, sometimes make them uncomfortable, then watch them rise up the ranks to what I call celebrity journalists. And my list is long. Coward, Stephen A., Isola, they all came to me. You at some point. But, when Dave McMenamin came
JP
to me
Chunga.
with a sincere desire to join the show consistently, I warned him. I said, here's what I said. I said, are you ready to be great? Is this something you want? And now we fast forward a few years later, and we can't even book our guy because he's such a big deal.
Yeah, I had to go through his assistant and then his assistant's assistant, and then they sent me through like a booking agency. But we did it.
So Dave McMenamin, on a Thursday, I'll ask the question that I asked you a few years ago. Are you ready to be great? Is this something you want?
Spence, I think I blacked out after you called me a young journalist. Everything after that was just starshine and rainbows. So, I'm just basking in the age domination you gave me. I want to be young forever. As far as greatness is concerned, if I'm young, it doesn't really matter if I'm great or not. I'll just be happy being young.
Fair enough. Well, it's been too long, man. So how are things? Everything good?
Yeah, everything's great. Happy to join you. And, yeah, I was kind of a bonehead getting back to Porter the last couple of weeks, so happy to rejoin.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I'll just get one thought from you on the Jazz because there's really nothing interesting about them other than the fact, Dave, that it looks like they're finally doing what they should have been doing all along and going all in on trying to just make sure that they're in a good position to draft somebody potentially special coming up. They're going to need a ton of luck draft night. Every lottery team does. But last 2 years, they've waited up until the trade deadline to break it down, and they're drafting like 9th through 12th, which is no man's land. And it looks like they at least have a plan in place, but it's a tough ask of this fan base to watch what looks like it's going to be really bad basketball all year long.
Yeah, they were not competitive for the bulk of their game against the Lakers the other night. Obviously, their record in the standings reflects that. I think they're going to end up being centers are us for the rest of the league, calling about, guys like Walker Kessler and Kyle Filipowski and Drew Eubanks, because there's a lot of contenders out there, Lakers included, that need another big man. And this is a year, maybe not quite as enticing as the Wemby year, but certainly a year where it's considered to be a really deep draft. And so if you don't end up with number one, I think there's top five are all considered to be pretty much blue chip talent that you're looking at, and I think it's a good strategy. Now, on the other hand, Will Hardy, I'm a big fan of, and I think he's going to be a special coach, and it's kind of tough for his development here to go through another year where being competitive is really not going to be on the table.
So you referenced the centers on the roster. I wonder, and look, I'm not going to ask you about John Collins all year, Dave. I promise I will not do that.
Well, you throw him to the list too. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, John Collins, Jordan Clarkson, Colin Sexton, like maybe outside of marketing and of course some of these young players, do you think we are going to see real movement? Our team's going to be calling about some of these vets that the Jazz have and maybe other teams could use. I don't know if John Collins the guy, but I guess I'll say who's safe as far as, outside of marketing, who do you think is safe on this roster for now?
I would say, obviously you start with marketing. I think, I don't think they're going to be giving up on a guy like Cody Williams anytime soon. Probably Kessler and Filipowski would be part of their long-term plans, but I asked Will Hardy about that the other day, and he kind of admitted that there are some redundancies in what they do. They're not exactly a clone of one another, but in today's NBA where, most teams are playing basically 1.5 centers in the rotation, one of those guys could end up being movable for the right offer. Certainly if it's an offer that would include another bite at the apple in this year's upcoming draft. And then outside of that, I do think you're looking at, a lot of players that could be had for the right price.
All right, obviously the Lakers, one of your main, if not your main responsibility, and I want to start with a macro question. You know, they're 10-4, and there's the narrative that JJ has found some things that other coaches have not been able to find with this roster, where they didn't do much. They added some. I mean, Dalton goes for 9 threes the other night, so they've got some different pieces. But what has stood out most to you about what this coaching staff has, quote, found with this Laker roster?
I think the buy-in from LeBron James and Anthony Davis has been apparent, and you're going to need that to have any chance for success with this group. And it wasn't that Darvin Ham didn't have that. I think it just waned over time, and I personally think that a lot of that had to do with some bad injury hands that Darvin was dealt. But in today's NBA, like, you just got to find a way to make it work, not use excuses. And JJ has had some injuries to role players, just like Darvin had last year. You know, Rui Hachimura has been in and out of the lineup. You've had Cam Reddish miss some time, but he's found a way. And they have a clear offensive identity. And, you know, when you have a team that's theoretically, when healthy, about 12 deep, that's important because it makes sure if the ball is being shared and it's moving, that even if your minutes are limited, you feel like you're a part of what's happening when you're out there on the court. So that's been really good. Now, defensively, there are still some limitations to this roster, and I think the addition of Jared Vanderbilt, whenever he can get healthy and return, should help that somewhat, but it's not going to completely fix the idea that, you know, as great as LeBron James still is, this is probably not going to be a good transition defense team with him on it. They might not be as bad as they've been if they all buy into the roles of what they're supposed to do. But, you know, LeBron is in energy conservation mode, and outside of the perfectly timed chase down block, and you'll see him do that, you know, about once a week still at this stage of his career, he's not going to be getting back and forming a wall in the lane. So there will be some things that JJ will continue to have to work with this team. But, you know, starting off 10-4 does a lot towards building confidence in what he's trying to instill and keeping the guys' attention as they move towards the latter part of this schedule.
Could Redick open up like a new pathway? I guess it wouldn't be new because he played in the league and he was a broadcaster forever, but he simply never coached outside of his kid, right? Like if the fourth grade coaching or whatever. We've seen some other situations in other sports. Our local soccer club had a player transition to coach right away. But, you know, there was a lot of noise about JJ getting that job without having any coaching experience. It's still early, but do you think this is something that maybe could be a break the mold type moment of how NBA coaches are typically hired?
You know, I think it will allow teams to look at it with more open-mindedness. I do think JJ's pretty unique, and I also think that the Lakers did themselves a lot of favors by adding two guys who have been head coaches in the last couple of years, and Scott Brooks and Nate McMillan, who have plenty of experience and also have the respect from what that experience meant from the guys on this roster. So I think it could happen, but I think you're going to – it's really going to come down to just how special the guy is, right? Because, you know, Steve Nash and Derek Fisher were pretty special players who got out of the game and then rather quickly became head coaches. And I probably would have bet that both of those would have been success stories, but they weren't. You know, really, it's Jason Kidd and J.J. Redick are the guys recently that come to mind. There could be another guy like that. You know, J.J. Redick, you know, kind of, if you want to see who the next guy is going to be, watch pregame and see who from the layup line of the opposing team J.J. Redick goes and chats with. Those are the type of guys he gravitates towards, so that's probably a good list to try to figure out who could be the next guy to do that. But I still think it's going to be more on the individual than just like a rash of them that will be qualified. I think where we will see a change is more people like that getting interviewed because it's a copycat league and more teams will want to find their J.J. Redick.
All right, so I haven't watched every Laker game. They're on national TV a lot, so I'll tune in, TNT or ESPN or whatever. But of course, we're watching the Jazz around here, and Dalton Connect looked like Ray Allen circa, 1995, but he was doing it against a defense that Will Hardy, with a great line after the game, said everyone knew he was going to shoot except for a few people, and they happened to play for us. So, look, it was standstill, Dave McMenamin back in the day buckets because you could have made those threes, Dave. You could have. I mean, he was wide open. But how real is his addition? Does it make them a little bit more dangerous, taking the Jazz game kind of off the table because the defense was so pathetic?
I mean, his last three games as a starter after Rui Hachimura dealt with an ankle injury, he's averaging like 26 points on 62% from the field and like 65% from three. Is that a sustainable, real thing? Absolutely not. But the guy plays with a ton of confidence, and the stakeholders in this team, being JJ, Anthony Davis, and LeBron, they have confidence back in him. And so I don't think this is a mirage. He'll be a part of this team's success moving forward. And quite frankly, some of the moments he's already been thrust into make me think as the games become more consequential, whether we're talking playing for $500,000 in an NBA Cup title or playing in a game down the stretch that will factor into playoff seeding into the actual postseason, I don't think the stage element, too big of a moment, is going to affect him the way it would with other rookies. To me, it will be as teams scout him and figure him out a little bit more and put more of an emphasis on him, will he be the next level thinker to be able to counter what these NBA high-level defenses are doing? And, quite frankly, when you talk about how the hell did this guy fall to number 17 in the draft, some of the kind of murmurs around it is, maybe his basketball IQ isn't quite where it could be. And so I think that would be the next stage of his development, seeing whether he can actually become a sustainable star.
With LeBron leaving social media, how do you plan on getting scoops?
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If someone tweets that they're leaving social media and later on that day posts on their Instagram story, what does that mean?
It must mean that he's only leaving Twitter or X, would be my guess, because you're right. He was heading over to Instagram. And look, I'm rarely on Twitter anymore. It's part of the gig. I send out the work, after the shows, and I send out links to interviews, but I rarely just tweet away I used to. So I'm not judging. I wonder, Dave, though, from your vantage point, does this have to do with how cruel people are to his son and how kind of this story has unfolded? And look, he's a 6'1" combo guard that doesn't appear at this point to have an NBA skill set. That's not a knock. That's an analysis, and that's the job. And I don't put any of this on Bronny. And look, I also don't feel bad for him. He's in the NBA making millions of dollars, but LeBron had to know that if this was how they were going to roll, that people were going to come out of the woodwork and take some vicious shots, and I've seen a lot of them. Do you think that's kind of the issue with LeBron taking off from Twitter?
I could see that being part of it. I do wonder, and I haven't had a chance to kind of talk to LeBron about this, so I'm just speculating, but I do wonder if the political season had something to do with it. The owner of X becoming a government appointee on the side that he did not vote for, did not endorse. I'm sure that's part of it. I do think this is a evolving conversation I've had with him over the years, just about the discussion around basketball. Why is it always about comparison? Why is it always about this guy doesn't do this well? Why don't we celebrate the game more? And that was kind of part of the point that Rich Kleiman was making, the longtime friend and business partner of Kevin Durant, that these are some of the greatest players you're going to see today or in any era. And it seems to be the discourse around them, particularly online, where it's a bunch of anonymous people who there's no consequences for being negative and showing that side of them, that have we just kind of lost our way? And like kind of that was part of the point of the JJ Redick and LeBron James podcast. Mind the Game was supposed to be, let's embrace the minutia of the actual game of basketball and kind of get away from the discourse that it seems to delve into toxicity quite so often. So certainly, I got to live online, for my work. And I've seen, just by being someone who carries the news of what's going on with LeBron James, the same trolls that would attack LeBron or Bronny will latch on to me sometimes, and it's not a pretty place. But I also I take it with a grain of salt that LeBron's actually off of social media.
Yeah, he'll be back. He's taking a break, and that's fine. But I've got to say, Dave, the crap you get is it's the ultimate compliment if you can understand what they're saying. Because the only thing I hear about you is you don't deserve to be married who you're married to, and that means you're winning. That means you're winning, Dave. That means you're winning.
Yeah, I'll take that, but that's fine. Yeah, and I agree with it. So it's all good.
How many names? I kept walking out to the mailbox when I heard the news, and I'd open the mailbox, and then I'd go to work, and I'd interview you, and it's like, hey, maybe we're friends. He's in town for the All-Star break. Say what up, do a live hit, hang out, and was I close to making the cut? That's all I want to know.
I could just say this, that LeBron did ask where his invite was as well, so you're in good company when it comes to that.
I feel better. I feel better, Dave.
Cuts it's a tough thing, but it was a wonderful day. Great thing to look back at.
Very happy for you. Hey, before I set you loose, we are doing this thing around here where the fact of the matter is the front office told the fans last offseason big game hunting, and there were rumors that they wanted to sign Paul George and trade for Mikal Bridges. I'm like, yeah, okay, right. So do I. Okay. I don't know that any of that was real, but every time they're front-facing with the public via the media, they talk about wanting to add good players as soon as they can. And with this era of the second apron and with this era of teams that have a lot of talent but can't afford them moving talent on, one thing you can latch on to is the Jazz are in a position to capitalize with cap space and draft picks if a team decides to shed a really good player. It's only 15, 16 games, but any candidates you think prior to the trade deadline of good teams with a high budget that want to get out from under some money?
I mean, I would go back to kind of where we started with this conversation with the Jazz. I do think it's in their best interest to, for lack of a better term, bottom out this year.
Agreed.
How attractive the draft could be. But I think there's any number of guys from Brandon Ingram to Jeremy Grant to even, someone like Trae Young. I'm not convinced that he'll be in Atlanta long term just because they're floundering around 500 still and he's a defensive liability. There will be names that I'm sure will be moved, maybe even Zach LaVine, maybe Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler, okay, there's a relationship with Dwayne Wade. You could maybe make that make sense in the Jazz structure. I'm just not so sure, again, they would be best served doing that this year.
I agree. Dave, thanks for the time, man. Great to have you back on the show. Have a great week, and we'll chat soon, okay?
Thanks, Spence.
All right. The great Dave McMenamin covers the NBA for ESPN. You can get him on Twitter at MC10 is where you find him. Yeah, he married Malika Andrews this summer. Looked like a lovely event. We could never, talk about that on air. I heard they were dating 3 years ago. I'm like, oh, dude, we should talk about it. He's like, no, don't want anybody to know. So that was the wedding I was talking about. And if you search Dave McMenamin on Google, the first result is Malik Andrews' husband. So our guy just gets cracked on. But he's a good dude, man. Appreciate Dave's time today on this Thursday afternoon. Jazz are in action tonight. They're taking on San Antonio. I do not think we will see Victor Wembanyama. So I guess you could watch Chris Paul against Patty Mills. I don't know. NBA basketball, it's fantastic. Let's bring in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Give him a call at 801-424-DISH. More affordable options with wireless situations, your cell phone, as well as internet, then obviously cable television. 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
This is the time. Call us up, guys. Take advantage of the upgrade. Get the big DVR, auto hops commercials, auto records your games, has all the streaming apps built in, so it's simple and easy. And guys, Dish wants to make your life even better by not only giving you the best promotion where you get 2 years worth of credits and the price is guaranteed not to change for 2 years, movie channels, but why don't we set you up with some Netflix? Since Netflix is built in, it's like a channel. You can get Netflix free for 24 months. Guys, this is worth more than $370. Call us up. Take the upgrade. Get Netflix for free. Lower your bill. Listen, if you're a cable or a DirecTV customer and you're seeing that $200 bill, guys, listen, call us. That means you're overpaying. Lower your bill. Save $70 to $100+ a month. Plus, ask about our internet solutions. I got lots of different offers right now, even one with a $150 gift card. And also ask about what we can help you with your mobile phone service. This products that we have right now are phenomenal. You can get a free iPhone 16 Pro or a Samsung S24 without a trade-in, no payments, included in your plan, and probably $20, $30 a month and lower than what you're currently paying. Call us 424-DISH. It's 801-424-3474.
I want to tell you about my friends at Diamond Coat Premium Home Siding. They're new here along the Wasatch Front. You won't believe what they can do to your home's exterior. Diamond Coat Siding, next generation system, delivers the exterior transformation you deserve to level up to the neighborhood standard. They're the total design solution that shows your personal style with endless styles and colors for limitless customization. And their 30-year no-fade warranty means your vision will last for decades to come. Designed beyond limits, beyond expectations with Diamond Coat, now available in the Salt Lake City area. It's premium home siding, limitless potential with endless styles and colors. They're your total design solution, year-round weather ready, durable in all seasons. Discover more at diamondcoatsiding.com. That's Diamond Coat, spelled K-O-T-E, siding.com. Going to do a little sports core with our guys from Handy and Handy coming up on the other side before we launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the drive. We'll get back to college football before we say goodnight at 6 for some Thursday night football with the Browns and the Steelers. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. Yep, Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday right about now with our good friends Garrett and Preston Handy from the law firm of Handy and Handy. Gentlemen, happy Thursday. How we doing?
Hey, Spence, how's it going?
All good here. Appreciate your time on a Thursday as always. Let's start with a story that got a lot of traction. We talked about it on the show. I don't think we talked about it on Sports Court, but a lawsuit that's been filed against the Mountain West Conference challenging the Mountain West Conference's transgender participation policy. And Utah State is looking to join this. It is a story that broke as a result of a volleyball match that I believe was boycotted by several schools, including Utah State. So give us the latest here. What's going on?
Yeah, right, Spence. As we know, we've talked about this issue of, transgender athletes, especially, transgender athletes participating in women's sports. We know there's legislation in Utah and across the country. We know that the NCAA has been sued several times. We know that the NCAA has set certain policies, what they're trying to adhere to. But the most recent is, a lawsuit filed by one player who actually was the captain of the San Jose State volleyball team and several former players, including a Utah State player, suing San Jose State as well as the Mountain West Conference over their transgender participation policy. And what they allege, anytime to get into this, they put in constitutional claims, namely that there's a violation of Title IX, where we know that publicly funded schools, they have to comply with Title IX, which is gender. You can't have gender discrimination. There needs to be equality in the gender across the board, and that's become a hotbed in these transgender participation issues. They're also claiming free speech constitutional claims that some of these players felt that they were not able to speak out of this issue. And so, what's at issue is the constitutionality of the NCAA and the conferences and San Jose State's policy. And what they're going to come in and say is, hey, we have a policy and we understand that there need to be a fair playing field, but we think that certain qualifications need to be met, levels of hormone, that type of thing. And, what's interesting is San Jose State has come out and they said they haven't even admitted there's a transgender athlete on the team. So add to it, enter Utah State, who boycotted a game, and that's one of the claims that some of these schools are saying, hey, this athlete should not be able to participate in the championships because it gives San Jose State an unfair advantage. SUU, Southern Utah University, also boycotted its game. So enter the state of Utah, which has asked to join this lawsuit. So it's a big thing and it's a big mess, and it's going to be growing here and decided along the way.
All right, Garrett, over to you, buddy.
Yeah, I just was looking at it. I mean, from a legal point of view, I'm not exactly sure what the state of Utah's involvement is really going to do here, except just provide kind of I would guess, want to show a more united front with the plaintiffs here in this case. I mean, but the underlying case is already going on, and it just does a little bit seem like the state of Utah, including political leaders in the state of Utah, thought, hey, let's jump on this bandwagon. We want to be a part of this. In whatever law is going to get set. But it's certainly a hot-button issue, not just here, but nationally and for the NCAA. And it's going to get, at this point, handled by the courts.
You guys were good to walk us through the details when the TBS and Warner Brothers Discovery brought their lawsuit against the NBA after there was some disagreements, I suppose, about how this thing was going to play out. But it has played out. Looks like we have a settlement. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, we've got a settlement, and so that means, TNT, your favorite show on TNT inside the NBA, you're still going to be able to get that. And TBS and Warner Brothers, they've had a 35-year relationship with the NBA, and once their contract came up, I mean, just to kind of remind some listeners, we did talk about it, like you said. But Amazon is jumping into the fray here, just like we've seen with other streaming services. The fight last week with, Netflix, flexing their muscles on this as well. But Amazon came in and said, hey, we're gonna partner with the NBA and start streaming games. Well, TBS and Warner Brothers said, not so fast. We've got a contract with you guys that gives us basically the right of first refusal. And the argument from the NBA was, well, you can't really, in reality, make us an offer because, you don't have the same platform that Amazon has. But So anyway, went back and forth, and it, like you mentioned, I mean, it does look like there has been a settlement reached, and this, the basis of this case is really just kind of basic contract law, whether there was a counter offer and that was matched, and they were given an opportunity to continue the negotiation. So looks like they're going to work it out, and there's going to be a host of other platforms as well and networks that will also provide NBA games.
All right, Preston, you're up, buddy.
Yeah, I think TBS and Warner Brothers, there are billions and billions of dollars at issue, and reading between the lines, I think that they probably thought that their position was maybe not as strong as they thought, in losing this. But my understanding is they get to produce the show, and it's a win-win for the fans because, everybody gets to continue to see Charles Barkley talking about basketball, and that was a great studio show, and that's going to continue on ESPN.
All right, yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how ESPN handles, the new synergies between the two. But great that Inside is going to continue. But moving on, when I woke up this morning, I said, "Please, Lord, can we have a story about Dr. Phil and bull riding?" And the good Lord has delivered. So the PBR apparently has cut ties with Dr. Phil. Did not know that there was a partnership there. Contract dispute between the bull riders and Dr. Phil, guys. The time is yours.
Yeah, I'm pretty thrilled about this too. Professional bull riding, which is a sport, competition, fans, everything. I didn't know Dr. Phil, famed TV, psychologist, counselor,
charlatan.
But Dr. Phil, he has a company that he founded called Market Street Media that has a contract with professional bull riding, and they broadcast professional bull riding. Didn't know that the same watchers were showing up to that channel and watching this, but what happened was there was some disputes going on behind the scenes, and out of the blue, PBR comes out and says, "Hey, we're canceling our contract with you. You're in breach of contract because you failed to pay rights fees." And Market Street Media, up in arms, says, "Whoa, wait a minute. We thought we were going to handle this behind the scenes. We thought it was going to be a discussion, a negotiation, maybe a mediation or an arbitration, and here you go and cancel your contract." So, there's going to be money at issue, and right now it's going to be an issue of breach of contract. PBR saying you breached the contract by not paying these rights fees, and Market Street's going to say, "Wait a minute, you breached the contract by getting out of this, and now we're out, and they're going to have to find someone else to broadcast this." Apparently they have a relationship with CBS, but the fans won't be losing their bull riding, but there's going to be a lawsuit coming.
All right, Gary, you're up, buddy.
Well, if PBR wins their case, this might just free up Dr. Phil, give him some time. Maybe, Dr. Oz is a cabinet nominee. Maybe Trump wants to tap Dr. Phil, and so he'd be available.
Well played.
And I
well
think
played.
That's got to get you excited, right?
Oh, you know me. That gets me really excited. Hey, I want the entire clown car involved. Okay, I want everybody possible. That's where I'm at with it. All right, we'll move over to one that we covered quite a bit. Dearica Hamby. Okay, and the situation with her and the WNBA. There's a claim that it's not her employer. That's from the league. She says they very much are. Give us the latest here.
Yeah, we did, and we talked about this story, but quick recap, Dearica Hamby, WNBA player, she was with the Las Vegas Aces and was essentially out on maternity leave and came back and contract changed and playing in L.A. now. And so she brought it's an employment lawsuit. It's a retaliation employment lawsuit claiming that she'd been discriminated against and was claiming damages for that. And so part of her claim in suing both the Las Vegas Aces and the WNBA is that they are both essentially her co-employers. And again, her argument that the WNBA is her co-employer is that they have substantial control over her, right? And so she's made this argument, then WNBA has come back now, and what we're talking about today, there's been a motion to dismiss, and the WNBA wants to get out of this case. They're saying we are not her employer. And we don't have we don't have those duties to her. We're not involved in this. I think she's got one significant argument is that well, as a WNBA player, we're unionized, and we have a collective bargaining agreement with the WNBA. And so this is different because, the WNBA has cited some precedent from other cases. I mean, there was a case involving a USC player who claimed that the USC and the Pac-12 were co-employers. The court found that they weren't. So there's some precedent in this, but this is a little bit new involving the WNBA. And so right now there's a motion to dismiss, and we'll see if the WNBA is able to get out of the case or whether they're kept in.
All right, Preston, your turn, bud.
Yeah, I agree with this case that they cited about the player that sued the Pac-12 and the NCAA. I think it's very distinguishable from this, where the WNBA negotiates the contract with the players' union, and has a lot of control, and especially where college athletes has changed now, and it's very different to professional athletes. They are employer, and when this case was brought, this was a student and not an employee. So I think the WNBA loses this, but if they win it and are dismissed, Hamby's claim continues against the Aces, and she'll be able to present her claim, this discrimination and retaliation claim. She was traded to the Los Angeles Sparks, got a local flavor here where it was announced this week that Lynn Roberts is headed to coach the Los Angeles Sparks and Derek Hamby.
That's right. All right, final one for our Thursday hit here, and it's the latest with Blake Anderson and his lawsuit he's filed against the Utah State University. I should just say Utah State University. So final one, guys. Give us the update here.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, the mess up at Utah State that's been ongoing for really about 6-7 months now, where a lot of the athletic department, including Blake Anderson, were fired. They waited a while for him because they did a big investigation, and finally they fired him. And there's been a lot of rattling of the chains by his lawyer that, hey, we're going to sue you, and we never heard anything. And then what was really interesting, it came in that the Justice Department came in here, and they were doing a pretty heavy investigation. I thought that was going to affect his claims a lot when they looked into this investigative. But what this grows out of, Spence, is he was terminated, claiming he violated some Title IX rules where he did not report certain violations, sexual assault violations, and it was looked at. And, he claims that he didn't do an investigation. He claims that he reported it like he should have to his superiors, and they were supposed to take this over. But as we know, he was fired, and now they file the lawsuit has in fact been filed now, just in the last few days. And his attorney, what he's claiming, Utah State's claim is, hey, you were fired for cause, meaning you violated your employment contract. There's specific things in there that say you cannot do. So we fired you for cause, and as a result, guess what? We don't have to pay the big amount on your contract, whatever it was, another 3 or 4 or 5 years. So it was millions of dollars lost to him. And his attorney's coming in saying, wait a minute, he was not fired for cause. He didn't violate this. And his statement is he was actually fired for convenience rather than for cause, meaning that he was kind of a scapegoat. And what he's alleging now is not only his contract that he lost, but he's also saying, hey, I'm pretty much unemployable. I'm kind of a black sheep out there that no one's going to hire. I want to continue. I was going to coach for another 10 years or so. I think he's in his mid-50s, and as a result, I've lost all of his opportunities. And he cited that some schools have come to him and, expressed interest, but because of all the controversy surrounding him and the black cloud, they're not hiring him. So that's part of what he's claiming, and if he can prove his claims, that's a big financial loss. All
right, Garrett, final word is yours, buddy.
Yeah, it's a big number, right? $15 million lawsuit is what's been filed. And so you got Utah State University right now. We've talked about them at the beginning of our little piece segment here. They're busy. Their legal department, and I think the AG's office actually handled with them intervening in the volleyball case that we talked about. But here, yeah, they've got this is a big case they've got to fight, and it's something we'll continue to follow.
All right, gentlemen, before I set you loose, for any of our listeners who have legal questions, how can they get a hold of you? Over at Handy and Handy.
Yeah, we'd love to help out any of the listeners out there with legal questions they have, especially in the area of personal injury, which is what we do. But you can reach us at 801-264-6677 or go to our website, handylawyutah.com.
All right, guys, thanks for the time on a Thursday, and we only have a couple of more weeks, but we got to still do it. Go Utes, all right?
Go Utes. Thanks, Spence.
Got to do it. Go Utes.
All right, there you go. Give them a call. Any legal questions, really good people, happy to help you out. And, if you're going through some things and you want some legal advice, call our friends over at Handy and Handy. All right, 5 o'clock hour tonight. We'll get back to some of the college football news and get you ready for a Thursday night football as Week 12 of the NFL gets rolling tonight. It's the Steelers and the Browns. Big one for BYU. We'll go over some of their clinching scenarios. Both BYU and Colorado can clinch Big 12 title game berths this weekend. They both actually need help from the Utes, which is pretty ironic. The two, I don't know, man. I've never been able to call Colorado a rival of Utah football. It feels weird. One of those forced things like, hey, you guys are in the same conference now, so you're a rival. Obviously, Utah, BYU rivals as well. So we'll go over some clinching scenarios. We'll talk some Utah and BYU football in the 5 o'clock hour. We'll say good night at 6 o'clock on this Thursday right here on ESPN 700. All righty, what is going on? It is time now for the Drive at 5. It's brought to you by LHM Ford. Larry H. Miller and Draper, the Ford King, Utah's #1 volume Ford dealer. And they'll beat any trade-in price in town by $750 anytime, any day. Find us online at lhmforddraper.com. It's a busy, busy sports night, busy local sports night. The Utah Hockey Club is getting ready to drop the puck in Boston. They're going to take on the Boston Bruins. That game can be seen on ESPN+. Then about an hour from right now, the Utah Jazz are in action as well. They're taking on the San Antonio Spurs. San Antonio's a 2.5-point favorite. And I believe Victor Wembanyama is not expected to play in that game for the Spurs because, why would you? So the Jazz and the Spurs, two teams that continue to rebuild step by step. One team certainly a couple of steps ahead because they do have a franchise pillar in Victor Wembanyama. Looks like Jordan Clarkson will not play. Neither will Walker Kessler, Devin Vassell, and Victor Wembanyama also out. So NBA basketball is fantastic. Injuries, of course, load management, as they like to call it. Speaking of NBA injuries, Luka Doncic has hurt his wrist. He's going to be out for at least a week. They're going to reevaluate after that. Paul George is getting more treatment on his knee. He hurt last night. Chaos in Philadelphia. But a fun night of NBA basketball tonight. A bunch of good games. You got the Magic and the Lakers, the T-Wolves and the Raptors. You know what? I take it back. No good games in the NBA. Do not watch the NBA tonight. My bad. You can watch the NFL tonight. You should listen to the NFL tonight. It's the Steelers and the Browns, Thursday Night Football from Huntington Bank Field in Cleveland, Ohio. Interesting stat that I read earlier today. Mike Tomlin on Thursday nights is shockingly bad. Now, I don't necessarily profess to know all of the answers as to why, but Mike Tomlin is 1-8 in his last 9 Thursday Night Football games. He's 0-5 in his last 5 Thursday Night Football games against a divisional opponent, which Cleveland is for Pittsburgh. Steelers are only a 3.5-point favorite, even though they've won 5 straight games. The Browns are 2-8. They're really bad. They're 1-4 at home. But this is a sneaky good game tonight, Thursday Night Football. Tomlin, coincidentally enough, juxtaposed that to his Monday Night Football record where he's 22-4. 1-8 last night, Thursday Night Football, 22-4 Monday Night Football for Mike Tomlin. So pretty fascinating game tonight. But, of course, a lot of the attention on the show today and throughout the course of this marketplace is on college football as we only have a couple of games left for both BYU and Utah. Now, BYU and Colorado can clinch Big 12 title game berths this weekend, okay? So here's how that would have to go down. BYU secures a berth in Dallas with a win over Arizona State and a Utah win over Iowa State. Colorado, on the other hand, can secure a berth in the Big 12 championship game with a win over Kansas, as well as wins by both BYU and Utah. So the four corner schools here got to play nice a little bit. You know, the Pac-12 buddies, Colorado and Utah, and BYU needs help from Utah. Colorado needs help from Utah. I never thought Colorado was a rival. That always felt awkwardly forced to me. It's never felt that way just to me, but it's kind of ironic that coming up in kind of a sad state of affairs, quite frankly, that now Utah football is in a spot where they can just help other schools who they maybe not like very much to make it to the Big 12 championship game. But that's not all. The BYU-Arizona State game is interesting because the Sun Devils still have a ton to play for. They're right in the mix. So does Iowa State. The 3-loss chaos group, as it's being called, also all have chances to qualify for the Big 12 championship game. Kansas State is not dead. Baylor, believe it or not dead. TCU, Texas Tech, West Virginia, they all have an opportunity. Now, look, it would have to be like Utah, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. It was like, hey, 17 things have to happen this weekend for Utah to have a chance to win the Pac-12, and they all happened. So that's ultimately what we're dealing with here. But big weekends for BYU and Colorado to potentially secure berths in the Big 12 championship game. So, as we talked about, 9 schools still left in the mix for the Big 12 to win a Big 12 championship game, but one of those schools is not the University of Utah. So we've been discussing this topic throughout the show with all of our guests, Richard Smith, Craig Bowler, Jack Gordon Monson. Dave McMiniman also hopped on. If you missed Dave, some good NBA stuff there. But on Monday, Coach Witt addresses the media. after Utah's 6th straight loss, this time to Colorado. And, I always enjoy listening to Kyle because I do think there are things you can learn if you pay attention. No coach is going to really outright tell you the truth. It's not a business of truth when it comes to the coaches and the media or a front office in the media. That's why there's media training. That's why these young men learn how to deal with talking heads that want to ask you questions. And sometimes, I don't feel like I'm this way, but sometimes there are media members that have ulterior motives and want to corner an 18 and 19-year-old kid to get information that may not be what the program wants you to hear. Now, good journalists are out there to speak truth to power and keep power in check, and that type of approach is dying day by day, which is why some people in power seem to be able to do whatever they want to do, right? Are we still talking about college football? Yeah, I think we are. So, unfortunately, that's just kind of the reality that we live in, but Kyle's one that he will give you things if you kind of listen. Jason Patacchio from the Salt Lake Tribune asked Kyle a really pointed, good question about the offensive coordinator search. And as Kyle expanded his answer to that question, it just struck me as a guy that's not going out like this. And I don't have any inside info. I have no idea. And let's also call it how it is. Kyle Whittingham does not need one or two more really good years of college football at the University of Utah to solidify his place. It's already cemented. The statue will be built. He doesn't like to talk about that. He is Utah's Lavelle in so many ways. And he doesn't need another year or two to prove that he is who we already know that he is. Now, it doesn't change the fact that this year, in my opinion, this is the most disappointing year of Utah football under Kyle Whittingham. There are other years where the record looks somewhat similar, but juxtaposed to preseason expectations, the fact that they're second to last in the conference and they have one conference win, and their only conference win is over Oklahoma State, after Vegas installed them as the favorite to win the Big 12, after us idiot media talking heads installed them as the favorites to win the Big 12, the fact that you're second to last and may not go to a bowl game, this is the worst year they've had under Kyle. And in an honest moment, I believe he would admit that. So it leads to the question, what does he want to do? Does it matter at all? Does it give a rip at all that this has been such a rough year as it pertains to his decision-making process? I don't know. I would imagine that it does, though. That's just a guess. He doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. He's already done that. Does he want to go spend time with the family? Does he want to find something else to do? He's going to step into a role with the athletic department as an advisor. And Morgan's going to be calling him. I mean, that relationship certainly has been solidified and isn't going anywhere. Or does he look at this and he says, no, not like this. I'm not going out like this. Losing 6 straight, to end the year, we'll see what happens. Iowa State, UCF, there's still a bowl game to play for. And I'm sure the upperclassmen and all the players that will be honored coming up on Saturday against Iowa State would very much love to continue to play football. These are ancillary benefits. They don't mean a rip. I mean, what does a throwaway bowl game mean for exposure for the university? Probably not much. The only bowl games you get with a tremendous amount of exposure are the top-tier bowl games like, the Rose Bowl, which we saw twice under Kyle. So what is there left to play for? I mean, ultimately pride, right? And I would encourage the community to come out on Saturday night to say goodbye to all of these players. We were talking about this with Sean earlier. I don't know if Cameron Rising's going to walk. I really don't. I have no idea. I don't know what he's going to do. I would be very surprised if he was back in Salt Lake next year. If I had to guess with Cam, he's going to go find a way to get paid to play football. I don't think that's in the NFL. I've never really thought Cam was an NFL quarterback, but he could go play for a myriad of different colleges that would write him a check. And you can roll your eyes all you want about injuries or what have you, but go back to when you were about to graduate college. If somebody found a way for you to stay in college for a year and paid you $500,000, what would you do? My guess is you'd stay, and you do that thing. But I do think the Cameron Rising Utah marriage has ended. Feels like a relationship that might still be kind of good, but you hug each other and say, hey, take care, and you go your separate ways, and you never talk again. That's what feels like is happening with Cameron and the University of Utah. But there will be a lot of players on Saturday that will be saying goodbye for the last time to Rice Echo Stadium and the fans there that have been massive parts of what will be remembered as one of the golden ages of Utah football, even though it never ultimately led to what I think a lot of people thought it could be or believed it would be. The last 4 or 5 years in a vacuum have been really cool. For anybody that's either covered Utah football for longer than a few minutes, for anybody that's cared about football in Utah at the University of Utah for longer than a few minutes, the last 4 or 5 years have been really cool. So these young men that are saying goodbye on Saturday certainly deserve a rounding or a raucous standing ovation and a loud reception when they walk out on the field with their parents. And I hope we give it to them because they deserve it, even though this year has been rough. But on Monday, Coach Witt talking about the search for the new offensive coordinator and how Morgan Scalley would have his fingerprints all over that search, as you would expect. Some people took that as an indicator that maybe this is it for Kyle, and as a result of how difficult this season has been, he will decide to exit stage left. I didn't take it that way. I took it that he sounded like a guy that's not done. He sounded like a guy that wants to come back. I think he's got 3 years left on his deal. I'm not sure if he coaches all 3. And I've talked to people on all sides of the equation here that believe that Kyle is very organized, maniacal, a creature of habit, and there is no hobby he can find to replace coaching football, so he's simply going to do it as long as he can. And I've talked to others that believe the death of his father still weighs heavily on him. And by the way, happy birthday, Coach Witt. It is his birthday today. And he did say not too long ago that he does not want to be a lifer. I don't know what that means. He's already a lifer. Like, people retire at 65. It's Kyle's age now. He's already been a lifer. And so does it mean he just wants to finish out his contract, which would be well within his rights? But what does it look like if it doesn't get better and Kyle comes back? That, to me, is the question right now. And I don't know where Mark Harlan is on all this. And quite frankly, I don't know what the power structure is up there. I guess Mark would technically be Kyle's boss, technically. But if I levied a guess and I just took an informal poll up on the Hill about how that power structure plays out, my guess is Kyle might be on top. And I know that a lot of people up there don't love that. It's the constant, ever-changing, evolving, sometimes devolving other times, relationships between athletics and academia at institutions, which I always find fascinating. Because we do this thing in our space in sports talk where we feel like we're the most important corner of the world, and the fact of the matter is we are very much not. But yet, most states across America, the highest paid public employees are college coaches, either football or basketball. In my home state, Connecticut, it's the basketball coach. Here, it's the football coach. Most places across the country, it's the football coach. And I know that doesn't sit well with folks up there that are on the academic side of things or the operational side of things. You look at the football coach that gets paid what, and we're getting paid what, right? So I know the power structure up there isn't something that all people are all that comfortable with and they don't love very much. But fact of the matter is, the reason these college coaches are paid what they're paid is because of the exposure they bring to their schools if they win at a high level. If they don't win at a high level, they lose their jobs. That's the reality. But they have the golden parachute because this is such a volatile space. Coaches are hired to be fired. So every time you see a story, you're like, wait, Jimbo Fisher was paid $76 million to not do his job? Sounds like a good gig. I don't know what Kyle's golden parachute is. I don't know what his buyout is. And I don't know that anything. So if we operate off the premise that he is coming back, and that's how I digested Monday, okay? The Monday media availability struck me in a way that no media availability has struck me all year. He was introspective. He listed a bunch of things that have to happen starting now. And let's be clear, you need to start now. The next transfer portal window opens up in just a couple of weeks, and this is not a situation where you can take a grip of time off in the offseason and then come back. Like, what has happened this year is, quite frankly, unacceptable for that athletic department and that football program based off the expectations that we have because of what they've built and based off of all the resources they have to build a good football team. So 6 straight losses, players leaving, transfer portal, rumors of players not being happy, offensive coordinators, being asked to do other things with their time. This year's not acceptable. What happens if we're here in November next year and it looks the same and Kyle's still the head coach? That, to me, is what's interesting because if Kyle is going to come back, This is a massive offseason because it has to look a lot different. But is there anything that could happen over the final, let's say he finishes out the deal, the final 3 years of his deal? Is there anything that could happen that would make you look differently about what he's done for the institution? I hope not. But I do feel like there's an underlying current in our community here that are ready for a change. People don't want to say that out loud, and I'm certainly not going to do the thing where I crack a mic and say Coach Witt is no longer the guy here. I would never do that because of the respect I have for him and the respect I have for what he's done and what he's built for a school that I attended. Now I've covered for basically 2 decades. I never thought they'd be in the stratosphere, but in a vacuum this year hasn't been good enough. And what does that mean? Ultimately, moving forward, if it's Morgan, the fact that they're down this year might not be a bad thing because if he can figure some things out, bring in a new OC, get a grip of new players. Coach Witt alluded to maybe 25, 26 guys taking off, so you're going to have a lot of space. Hopefully, Mark and everybody up there have been able to corral some NIL situations to make sure you can pay the players. I know fans hate that. That's the deal. So if it's Morgan, he has a chance to potentially look like a savior. Coming in next year after an offseason of an influx of talent, maybe bringing Utah back to the precipice of competing consistently for conference championships. But if it's Kyle next year, it also has to look better for a number of different reasons as opposed to why it needs to look better if it's Morgan. I do think the OC hire is going to be interesting. Whoever it is, and we've all heard the same names, whoever the hire is, it will indicate what the direction is for the future of the program. If it's another run-of-the-mill meat and potatoes, all we're going to do is run the football, try to stop the run because that's what Kyle wants to do, I don't think folks around here are going to be all that thrilled. If it's a little bit out of the box, take a swing, swing for the fences, maybe it's a guy that is known for a different type of approach and a different type of style, I actually think that would be met by a lot of people around here with a lot of excitement, but only time will tell. I'll ask Gordon this. Gordon Monson is going to stop by coming up on the other side. We'll say goodnight at 6 o'clock for a really good Thursday night football game. It's the Steelers and the Browns. We are your home of the NFL, and we roll on next right here on ESPN 700. The only thing I can think of with this song is Dwight Schrute singing the didn't he do karaoke to this song? Like one of the Christmas party episodes, somebody brought a karaoke machine and Meredith got drunk and hilarity ensued or something.
That all did happen. I can't recall if this is the song, but yeah, that was that's a funny episode. It's a good one.
Every holiday season, I fire up all the holiday Office episodes, the Thanksgiving episodes. I believe they're Thanksgiving episodes. Definitely Halloween and Christmas, though.
Yeah.
So it's that time of year.
And when you go back and watch The Office, those are like some of the episodes that sometimes stand out. They're really funny.
When Michael is trying to figure out if Meredith is an alcoholic and he asks her if she's ever heard the teachings of the Mormon Church, I died at that line. I thought it was hilarious.
The White Elephant episode is really funny.
Classy Christmas?
Halloween, as you mentioned, the Dwight always makes those episodes hilarious.
No doubt. So we are getting into holiday season. Hopefully you have some holiday cheer coming your way. Benihana Christmas, highly underrated. Right, when they're at the spot where the Nard dog is sitting next to Michael Scott, he's trying to serve as the wingman. They take the waitresses back to the party, and
Twins.
They confuse them. And Michael marks one of them, and then he invites her, I believe, down to the all-inclusive resort in Jamaica, where he ends up taking Jan
Levinson Gould.
Boring. Call me when she turns over. Anyway, inside reference there. Probably a little inappropriate. Porter, I have an idea.
You're an idea man.
I am an ideal man. You could be the Connor Stallions of Utah football. I think that's a path that you could take.
I'll take that as a compliment just because I'm a grinder, watching a lot of tape.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I'm on the sideline.
So he's helping Michigan even after being let go from his job. So currently, Connor Stallions is the offensive coordinator of a high school in Michigan whose quarterback is the number one recruit in the country named Bryce Underwood.
Right.
And he was going to LSU, and he just flipped to Michigan. Connor Stallions is his OC.
He is helping in that regard. What I will also say is that Connor Stallions has done this like media tour a little bit, gone on podcasts, and every real football person that I've talked to, or even folks in Big Ten country, have kind of said that this guy is full of it. Like, yes, he did the thing. He helped Michigan out. He still is in some ways, as you mentioned. But he also has this this angle where he is trying to kind of make himself a bigger part of the story than essentially it was. And with the number one quarterback in the country at the high school level, his team that he's offensive coordinating for, not doing so hot.
Okay.
But hey, I'll steal some signs. I was on the sideline up there this morning watching some football, high school football, with your bountiful football team, state champs, by the way.
The what is it? The Red Hawks, Red Tails. They're the Braves.
Bountiful.
Sorry, cancel me. They won the state championship.
They did against shout out to my guys. A bunch of my college friends are coaches at Roy.
Oh, okay.
And they had a ridiculous matchup. Last second touchdown. There was an onside kick for a touchdown. It was just a ridiculous game, but fun watching, and bountiful state champs.
Shout out to the Braves. Congrats to the state champs. While you're putting your trophy in the trophy case, just look for the 1997 Bountiful High School state champs on the basketball side. Look for the picture, and, you might find your boy.
Did you autograph it?
I autographed the ball.
There we go.
Pretty valuable, getting more valuable as we roll along with the show. Anyway. All right, let's get out of here. Thursday Night Football coming up next. Porter, what comes our way on a very, very short Friday show?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, it's a short Friday show because we've got Utah Hoops, the ladies team. It gets going tomorrow, and some Utah men's basketball as well. So we'll start the show off actually talking some golf, believe it or not. Your guy Patrick Manning, who was out of town when you were down there this last weekend, wants to make it up to you, wants to chat a little bit. And they also just announced yesterday the LPGA is heading to Black Desert. So we'll give him a few minutes, and then we'll chat with one Blaine Fowler, BYU, Arizona State, Utah, Iowa State, all of the above with Blaine.
It'll be a quick Friday show, but get your weekend started out the right way and join us for that. Then stay tuned for some Utah basketball. We'll say goodnight for a Thursday, and a special thank you to Richard Smith, Craig Bowlerjack, Gordon Monson, and Dave McMiniman. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show today, head on over to our website. It's called ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. That ESPN 700 app is available for free in the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store as well. Then for what we do in our space every day for 4 hours, check out the podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things, give us all the stars. It actually helps. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy your Thursday evening. Talk to the Friday Drive, an abbreviated one. You can find it right here on ESPN.